Meeting in order of the Board of Supervisors business meeting. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please, sir?
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Here.
Mr. Hippel?
Here. All right. Next on our agenda is presentations. Mr. Rossi with VDOT. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you grew a beard since last time we saw you, like Father Time or something.
we do, don't we? It's amazing. Here to give the quarterly transportation update. It's been a wet quarter for us. However, we've been able to accomplish quite a few things. Work orders have been pretty steady over the past 3 months. We received 734 work orders, and we have completed 636 work orders in that time frame. About an 87% completion rate. The outstanding, as you can guess it, are mostly drainage or sinkholes, you know, something to do with drainage, whether it's ditches or few highlights of the accomplishments. We did 89 drop inlet repairs. We swept 34 lane miles of roadway, completed ditching of 2 miles of roadway, asphalt patching, and all of our mowing is complete. However, I will say that we have a primary, all the primary routes are scheduled to be litter pickup in February, and then all of the secondaries in the county scheduled for March to be picked up with trash before we get into some completed projects. The News Road and Centerville Road project that was completed early November turned out to be a nice project with turn lane and signal. That intersection safer. Our plan mix schedule that was completed later November, and that completed, you know, a few of our primary routes, 5, 60, 143, and some. We did do some HSIP projects with the FYA, flashing yellow arrows, Route 60 westbound at Greenmount Parkway, Lightfoot Road, and more. Current projects is our I-64 widening, segment 3. I won't go through all the details, but that project is continuing to move along. We do have our intentions are to open up 3 lanes of traffic from 143 to segment 2 by July 4th, and then with the completion of the project, moving through with that. Long Hill Road widening, that construction is ongoing. They are, if you've been through there, you can see the roundabout moving and construction moving along. That construction is complete fall of 2021. And part of that project is a revenue share project that we have for improvements at the intersection of Old Town and Long Hill with the extended turn lanes. That also will be in the phase 2 of the Long Hill project, and early summer 2021 will be completed. Our Skiffs Creek Connector project from 143 to Route 60, that is a design build project. We have awarded that project to Shirley Construction. They are in the design phase now, and we'll start work. You'll see dirt turning around the spring of this year, and that has a completion date of the fall of 2022. Nice to get that project. It's been around for a long time, opened up, but it's great to see that moving. Our plan mix schedule for next summer, you'll see a list of roads there that's advertised this month. That'll be let in March. You have Route 5 from Eagles Way to west of Ironbound Road. I'm just going to go through the routes if you have any questions. 143, 2 sections. We got a section of 199 westbound, Monticello from Ironbound to 199, and then you'll see 5,000 Monticello. That's where it changes routes all the way out to News Road. We have Centerville Road from Route 5 to Theodore Allen Road, Route 682, Neck of Land, and subdivision The Colony, Druid Hills, and Elmwood. Some upcoming projects is our Croker Road project. That's the 2-lane section by the library, making it 4 lanes all the way out to Route 60. We're moving along with that project. We also, part of that CMAQ funding, created a project for sidewalks and bikeway on Route 60 from Croker to Old Church Road. That is in projected, it's in right-of-way now, but construction is projected to start in late 2022. We have some smart scale projects. That is the Long Hill Road shared use path. That's really connects the project limits where it starts over on the other side of 199 now, back to the community center side of 199, connecting that bike trail or trail across 199 into the sidewalks that are existing, trail that are existing around the, I guess that's. We have some county safety and operational projects. We're installing a crosswalk there at Ironbound Road, at Veterans Park, into the Meadows. We started with laying a pipe in the ditch and kind of showing where it's going to be, but we need our concrete contractor to come in and install the sidewalks and the ADA compliant raised markers, stuff of that nature, and then we'll come back and install signs and our crosswalk tape, B6 tape. You're probably looking at about 4 weeks before that's complete. We've issued the task order, but this time of year it's a tough with the weather and concrete work. We have to have at least 50 degrees to pour it, so we have a long list of work, but we'll get to it. Traffic studies, 648 Howard Drive, 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, Monticello Avenue, Monticello Marketplace. We removed the flashing yellow arrow at that intersection due to police accidents. And then we also did the Fieldstone Parkway at Mill Pond intersection safety review, which we're refreshing the pavement markings. We also have speed studies that are currently active for Route 5 at the intersection of Centerville, and that is looking at reducing the 45 to 35 through that intersection. And also we're looking at Route 30 past Fieldstone Parkway, where it goes from 4 to 2 out to the New Kent line at possibly reducing that speed limit from 55, 45 to 45. So both of those are in their draft form. We're working on those now. We're also looking at the intersection of Green Springs and Centerville with Route 5 and trying to complete a project that was brought up during our RSA with making right in, right out at Green Springs Road and changes some of the signage and route panels and markings are changed through those intersections. But we also want to do that at the same time when we're reducing the speed limit. And then the last thing I want to hit on, or actually 2 things, we have our Virginia's for Lovers, Not Litter campaign. We certainly want to promote our Adopt a Highway projects and appreciate the volunteers that help us, quarterly basis, going out and picking up the shoulders of our roadways, and without them, we'd have a hard time keeping up with litter area. So we have a very robust Adopt a Highway program, but like I said, it takes volunteers, it takes a lot of people to keep our roads the way we need them, clean and I will say that we are, just a little addition, we are looking at some safety, systematic safety initiatives in the area. And those include the high visibility backplates. You've seen some of those going up on the backside of the traffic signals. As you come up to it, it's bright yellow, really makes them stand out. We're also the FYAs, which we've been working for quite a while on. We're also looking at some curves, delineation. Cranston Mill Pond is also going to receive those chevrons in certain sections. But just some initiatives there that we've gotten through some highway safety improvement money. We're looking at pedestrian crossings. The shoulder wedges, when we do our plant mix this year, instead of normal wedge would be a sort of a 90-degree in face to the pavement, we're actually putting a 45 in it this year to help with runoffs, with getting back up on the pavement. You know, as people run off the road, it creates that little dip right there. And if you ever ran off the road just a little bit, it's kind of tough to get back on sometimes. This 45, placed at a 45-degree angle, helps that transition back onto the pavement. So hopefully we'll see some crash reduction or safety reduction or savings with that. And then also center rumble strips, or rumble stripes they call it, and edge line rumble strips. And that's really, center line is to help drivers know when they've gotten to the center line to reduce head-on crashes. And then certainly the edge rumbles help with runoff, hidden fixed objects run off right to the road. We're looking at Route 5 out towards Chickahominy for that, as well as, well, we were looking at past Chickahominy on up into town, but right now I think it's just going to be the section from Chickahominy Bridge out towards where Route 5 splits. We've looked at some alternative, because there's a lot of growth in that area, we've looked at some alternatives with our rumble strips into how to reduce the noise from our rumble strips. And we think we have a pretty good plan there as well. And I have out to some local areas there, you know, communities, just to kind of let them know that this is coming. Other than that, that about concludes my quarterly update. I'd be glad to take any questions or comments from the board.
Questions?
Yes, sir, if I might. Jason had mentioned to me that you were having discussions about the area in front of Stonehouse Elementary. Do you have any kind of update as to what that's looking like for us?
Yeah, we did we've been working, really, we had a meeting a few weeks ago, kind of finalizing the RSA that we did. One of the things is we went back to get some more information on trying to figure out how many people are cutting through Old Stage. But initially, I think our first steps are going to be to reduce or to eliminate the through and left turns out of Old Stage. That was over 50% of the crashes in that intersection were throughs and lefts from Old Stage. And 70-some% of the injuries was from that movement as well. So obviously
which is across the street.
It is across the street, but that is, you know, looking at the data, that's where the accidents and injuries, majority of them are coming from. Now that is a long, busy intersection. Now we did look at some long-term things, and we'll still continue to develop those. But I think right now at this point, right out only Old Stage. Have to go down to the turn lane. There is a, you know, there is the intersection, Anderson's Corner. You know, you could go out the other way and go down Anderson's Corner to, if you didn't want to make the U-turn, but there's enough distance there to safely get over, make a U-turn, and come back the other way if you're leaving from Old.
Just making U-turns with 55-mile-an-hour speed limits, is that going to be an issue, do you think?
I don't think so, really because traffic volumes are low. The crossover there has a turn lane already. It is a wide crossover, it has plenty of room. We're doing some calculations now for turning movements for buses and larger vehicles, just to make sure that we have enough room for them to maneuver safely. But as for making the turns, I don't see that being an issue. And we do R-cuts, all across the state, and that's pretty much how this is designed, as an R-cut.
Okay. Thank you for continuing to look into that. I know
welcome.
I still hear from citizens about that area. And then you did mention that, well, and thank you, first of all, for hosting the Zoom meeting for us to be able to talk about the situation there going into Barhamsville, on Route 30. And so you're looking at a reduction of speed limit to where it goes from 4-lane to 2-lane? Is that what we're looking at?
We are looking at the section from Fieldstone Parkway out to the James City, New Kent line. That's in our district. Richmond District, VDOT, is looking from the
other end.
James City, New Kent line through Barnesville.
But those talks are going on.
We
with ours?
are. We've done a draft speed study, and they are working their draft speed study. We have communication going on between the two districts, and once we finalize and sign and seal all of this, our intentions are that to have another Zoom meeting with the same audience and go over, to include Richmond District, to go over the findings and what we found, and what our thought process was, and then
So
what our recommendations
just so I
are.
can clarify, where you're looking at in James City County going into New Kent, for where it drops down from 4-lane to 2-lane, have you considered bringing that that stretch further up, closer to where the entrance and exit for the interstate, or is it literally just right there?
Really, based on our findings, and we looked at the accident history through there, our focus is the 2-lane section, not the 4-lane section.
Okay, all right. Thank you for your help with all that. I really appreciate it.
I had two questions. Well, one, first of all, thank you for the update on the crosswalk. I knew we had started, but it's probably just like waiting for the
We got
concrete work.
started, and then we got held up.
Yeah,
That's how that works.
as long as we're still on track, that's what I
Yeah,
wanted to find out.
we had it on the plan,
Yeah.
and then some other things happened, so it's sort of a start and stop real quick.
The only place I would offer for maybe a potential interim patching until we get to paving is when you're coming on Monticello to get onto 199, coming from Monticello Marketplace News Road in toward Newtown.
That's making the left onto the
Making
exit.
the right turn. There's the
from the
seam,
marketplace,
seam
okay.
between the through lane and the turn lane is just like mortar holes all the way down. And it's you have to get over, or else you're riding across a whole bunch of potholes there. So that, if you could have somebody take a look at that and maybe do a little patching on it to make it a little smoother for the transition, I'd appreciate it. And then the only other question I had, and I'm going to ask Chairman to chime in on this. I went to my first TPO meeting this last week, and they were doing the projections on how they rank order projects for funding, and it came out with the idea of committed funding and uncommitted, and we were talking about how they're planning to rank order things for uncommitted projects. Everything that we have going on right now, the Long Hill improvements, the Skiffs Creek, and the Croker Road that are coming along, those are, my understanding is the funding is committed. It's just a matter of just getting the timing and everything done.
Right, these projects are funded in the
okay.
6-year plan, yes.
My understanding then is the ones that are not funded right now are the study we did down on Route 60 through Grove. There's sections down there that
Pocahontas Trail.
would have to compete for funding. And then the other would be the Phase 2 and Phase 3 of Long Hill Road, once, further out. So those are the only ones that you can think of in James City County that are sort of on our radar as projects we'd like to do, but we don't have the funding for right now.
You normally say that they're on the long-range plan, but they are not in the 6-year plan yet.
Yes.
Or they have funding in the 6-year plan, but they're
Not
not
enough.
fully funded.
Yeah, okay.
I wouldn't put all three of them in the same basket though, because Pocahontas Trail has, over 70, let me just say, it's about 60% of the funding on it in the 6-year plan.
Okay,
I think Paul has worked to, with the TPO to try to get additional CMAQ funding to fully or to closely fully fund that project. So, you know, we're talking 26, 27 funding years. The Long Hill Phase 2 and Phase 3, they are not in the 6-year plan. So they do not have funding on them. So that's a little bit of difference of the two projects. One of them is a lot further along than the other two. Not to say that, you know, if it is a smart scale application for full funding and it becomes a priority or is scored to receive funding, you're still looking at 6 years out.
yeah, the projection, 2045 projection plan that we're working on right now, we'll come back to the TPO, I guess, in the next meeting or so. So my first meeting, they were looking at presenting the rank orderings of all that and talking about how much money was available for local projects as opposed to regional or other previously committed. And it's not a whole lot of money. And so I wanted to make sure which ones we were looking at and where they were. So the Pocahontas Trail down there, the Grove, it is in the 6-year, it does have some money set aside.
It does have some money in it, yes.
Well, we're making greater progress than I've seen in a long time, so thank you very much.
Y'all are working hard at it as well.
So I very much appreciate the fact that we are focusing on the John Tyler, Centerville, Green Springs situation. So I look forward to continued updates about that. So thank you so much. I did want to follow up on the rumble strips from Chickahominy down to where the light is, is where you're talking about going.
Yeah, it doesn't quite go that far, but I can show you where we're looking at.
Okay, that would be great. And how, you know, when you say reduced, just because I'm sure I'm gonna.
It's longer skips. You know, the skips, it doesn't vibrate as much. They're
Okay.
not. They're a little angled different. It adds. It reduces the noise per se, but it still provides enough that if you're driving a vehicle, you can hear it.
Okay.
There are different designs. You know, originally we go with the loudest, you know, wake you up type design, but with the community present that's there, we looked at our other ways of doing the same thing, but trying to reduce the noise impacts.
Okay.
I had shared that with the management office up there. I have not received a response yet, but
Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, because there's also homes that are just right on
And
that.
on the other side, yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, Governor's Land has homes that
Yes.
has some streets that back up.
Yes.
There is some green space in between the homes
Right.
in there, but you know, as that gets mature and less low-lying, you know, plants and stuff of that nature, that kind of opens up, especially this time of year with less vegetation and stuff of that nature. So noise probably does increase in those areas because, like I said, most of those are mature trees through there and the undergrowth isn't really there like it was 10, 15 years ago, so.
Okay. So if you get a chance to send me something that.
Yeah, we did all of this with them in mind, or with the people in mind.
Okay.
There's no residence right on the road. You know, there's no real houses within 150 feet of the road.
Setback is a little further.
Yeah, the setback is a little further there. So I think we're in a good situation.
Okay.
And plus, you know, this is really for the safety of the roadway, so.
Right.
But we did look at alternatives to try to reduce those impacts.
I believe that Mr. Peirce told me that you all were looking, I had an inquiry regarding some lights that were put up in a neighborhood around Halloween time that are stringing across the road, and you all are going to be looking at that?
We are. I gave that to our permit section to see if it was one permittable and
Okay.
other, you know, obviously anything that is within VDOT right of way or overhangs VDOT right of way has to be permitted.
Okay.
And then there's the question of, is this permittable? If it's, they're working that from our
Okay.
land use side.
And then I believe this is, and you may have mentioned it, and if you did, I'm sorry if I couldn't hear, that I believe this is in your area, but where the improvements have been made to Centerville, but that paving is still uneven right there in front of the gas station, Green Spring?
Well, the section that we're paving this summer includes that.
Okay, sorry. I knew you probably had mentioned it, but, okay, just because we received an inquiry about it.
Yeah, it is rough. I mean, you got that beautiful project and you run right off into some of the worst pavement in the county, but that is in our paving schedule this coming summer.
And thank you for being here today. Nice to see you. So, thanks.
I don't have a whole lot. Just want to thank you again for the addressing of some of the older subdivisions that have not really seen a repaving in a long time, getting the plant mix in there. Very much appreciate that in the Lake Powell Road area. And certainly I understand the problem with drainage right now is just incredibly difficult. Everywhere you look, the ground is like a sponge as you walk on it, and I know that that's creating problems getting you. And I was just wondering if there are ways in which either through retrofitting or as new developments are coming online that this kind of standard way of addressing drainage is being improved.
Well, I can say this, we have a much better and improved inspection prior to taking subdivisions, subdivision street and drainage structures into the state system for maintenance now. A lot better than we ever did before. We are doing pipe inspections, video inspections of our, subdivision pipes, our ditches, our, the infrastructure, drop inlets, things of that nature now that really we were doing with a mirror. You could only see as far as you could with a flashlight and a mirror on both sides and kind of go, if it looks straight, you said, okay, yeah, it looks fine. But now we're doing a much better job. So I would really say that most of our issues are with the older subdivisions. Now, no infrastructure is going to last forever. And we've just awarded a pipe pipe replacement contract where we are going to try to address some of the older infrastructure with those type of improvements. So we do have some subdivisions that are, we inherited issues with pipes separated, cracks in the DIs, those type of things that, we'll always deal with those. But if we could go in and systematically take care of, a 400-foot run here or there, those repeat callers or repeat offenders, I call them, hopefully it can reduce those.
It would really be helpful to get a little bit of a sense of how you're prioritizing those and how we can perhaps draw your attention to some areas that may need that kind of.
Well, we have a lot more need than we have funding.
Sure.
I'll start with that. And we've already prioritized more than I can afford. However, I have been able to, hopefully if this year goes well, I was able to structure this on-call project sort of as a renewable for the next 3 years. So I'm trying to get funding to renew this project on out. So as we move through the years, I'm hoping that we can get to some of those that we're unable to in year one, in year 2, 3, or 4.
Thank you very much.
May I ask one follow-up?
Yes, go ahead.
I had talked to Mr. Purse. There were some barricades that were on Green Springs that I believe Verizon had left. There was some road work that was done. I think we ended up having to get VDOT to go out because there was not you had not received
Emergency utility work done.
a permit, yes. So I'm assuming VDOT, somebody came out and did push them off the road. But there's 4 of these orange and white barricades just laying there. Do we just let them lie until Verizon comes to get them, or What do we do with those?
Let me look into it.
Okay.
I wasn't aware that
I
they
know
were
it's
still
not-
there, but
But it's just very weird that they're just laying there still.
that was the ones on Green Springs, right?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Triple, sorry.
No problem. Let you write that down before I start. I've got a couple of them, and one's in Roos area. Mark Hockaday contacted me about the road behind Five Forks, you know, that small road that goes into that. I can't even think of the name of the road right now, but he wanted me to inquire if there, I know y'all been out there a couple times to clean the ditch out, and it's relieved some of it, but it's still piling up at the end. And he said even if y'all could cut a ditch across the end of his property, you know, to get to the other drainage to drain that water that's filling that road up. So when it rains real hard, it backs up 90% of the road, and he's getting a lot of water that's running down there. And I know you're familiar with it. He's
I am.
reached out to you several times, but he met with me the other day, and I talked to Ruth about it, and then she said, yeah, go ahead, and you know, because it was in her zone, and so he's looking at if we maybe put a ditch across the end, then that way it would get that water out into the other ditch and maybe relieve that. 'Cause it's kind of bottled up.
Let me look
in
at I may have to get it surveyed because I'm not exactly sure where the right of way ends.
Okay.
You know, because that used to go through
Right.
a long time
Used to be
ago.
road through there. Yep.
And I have a feeling that it was probably abandoned,
Uh-huh.
a portion of that, but let me look into it.
Okay.
And that will determine whether it's VDOT or not.
Right. Okay. And he said if you need to go across his, he'll work with you on that to get it through there. So and evidently he goes all the way to the end down there somewhere. So, all right.
Last parcel.
Crance's Mill Pond, we're constantly open and shutting, and this year's been a record year for the amount of rain we've gotten. So we're doing it more than normal. But is there a way to look at that and basically the culverts, if we change those culverts out to a larger culvert, we could get more volume through there. And most of the time, those culverts are, you know, they're small enough, they're not carrying the load.
There's three culverts
Yep.
in there, and let's go back a little bit. They changed the dam
Yep.
on the pond.
They did.
10 years ago, something like that, 9, 8, something like that. Made it larger.
Uh-huh.
So I think the CFM is increased, but then, you know, you have logs and debris that associated with any mill pond that'll come over the spillway and clog up a pipe or something at any time. We try, you know, that's a tough little area.
It
You
is.
got those curves and that, you know, steep inclines going into that bottom from both angles.
Yep.
And, but we try, pretty much before every rain, because that's such a hot spot with flooding, to go down there and make sure that there's three cross drains in there to make sure that they are open. The downstream side is not the channel that it used to be as well. So, you know, we've discussed for many years about raising the grade of the roadway, putting a box in there versus culverts, cleaning out the downstream, which I couldn't do, but the downstream side to try to release more of that water. It's just a tough spot.
It is.
And this year, like you say, has been uncharacteristically wet or heavy rains. So we've had some pretty good floods in the area, which we've had to close the road. But they seem to run off pretty quickly with minimal damage to the roadway.
Right.
You know, the biggest issue has been the outflow shoulder. You know, we have to go back and
Right.
replace the outflow shoulder at that intersection. But, you know, I think that, you know, if we were looking at a project or something of that nature, that would have to be a project. It's not
Right.
something I could do with state forces.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Go right ahead.
So I have the same thing down in my area at Centerville and 5. The sign is permanently there that says road closed. It gets scooted over into the grassy area. But this rain, there's rain coming onto the road, and a few weeks ago, we've had so much rain, as you said. The road was flooded, but the sign wasn't out there, and I wasn't sure who to contact because it was a Saturday.
You can just contact our hotline.
The
I mean,
VDOT
same
hotline,
line?
because
Yeah.
are you all responsible for coming out and putting the road closed sign out?
We are.
Okay,
But
okay,
yeah, you can, it's right at the beginning of the paperwork you have.
Okay.
It's the 1-800-4 road, or
okay,
it's you talk to a call center,
yeah,
but what that does, if it's during a weekend, they send it to our TOC, and our
Okay.
TOC contacts the appropriate person.
okay, yeah, because it's definitely an issue, that's why the sign was left there, but then it's like, should I go drag it out myself? But,
Yeah, and then I'll tell you, the two different issues over there, there's a beaver problem.
Yep.
That's what's going on over there on National Park Service property. I mean, that's really, we got, right across Route 5, they just built a new dam between the Capitol Trail and Route 5, that we're working on with, USDA. But that whole area, it's a lot of beaver activity in that area, so any moment, go up another dam or block a pipe or something of that nature that creates some flooding.
and the other area
They
where.
work a lot harder than we do.
They do.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, the first time Scott and I went out there, he was like, I've seen a lot of beaver dams. I've not seen one like this. The other issue where there's starting to be a lot of overflow as well is 4H Road,
The
between
Green Springs and 4H Road?
the farm. Well, it's actually on 4H Road as you just pass Jamestown, it's Jamestown 100 there.
Okay, so you're talking on the 31 side of.
Yeah, I've just started to notice there's, as we've had more weather, we've had a lot of water on the actual road, which is a new thing. So,
I'm not sure there. I'll ask. I don't go out during the storms.
Sure.
Myself, but our area headquarters, pretty much know where those areas are.
Yeah.
They prepare for rain events, large rain events. Prior to storms, we're in that area, cleaning out the pipes from, was it 1600 or, from that road back towards, the bridge. There's 2 or 3 culverts in there that, we get tidal water, but we want to make sure that it flows, and it's a wooded area through there. So they sort of have a script that they go through prior to big events to try to hope the known areas. Now, there's always areas that we're not aware of or we can't get to, that have to come back after an event. They do try to do, cleaning of DIs and areas that they know that are problem areas. But we'll look at that as well. It sounds like to me that's probably a pipe, if it wasn't happening before.
no, it was not happening
There's
before.
probably a pipe stopped up.
With all this discussion, it reminds me that last week I saw a lot of activity around Lake Powell Road at Marclay by the airport. Was that something that you all were involved in? It looked like it was an effort to deal with some of the.
The only thing I'm aware of, there's a drainage issue over there. And we worked on making sure that was in the system, but I'm not aware if that was something that our area headquarters did or not. But I can check and let you know.
Thank you.
All right, let's see, I had a few more. I know the county, y'all have both talked, and we've got 2 members on the board that are really worried about traffic lights, and we're gonna try to look to address some of those issues maybe this year coming up, and maybe get that in the process, and more for a safety issue and problems in both of those areas. Covered that. Route 60, when you turn Anson's Corner going back to Lenexa and New Kent and all, that area probably floods worse than anywhere in the county as far as the water. Not that it can't.
There's a lot of water bags on the road.
It is.
Not necessarily, the road's not necessarily flooded,
No,
but there's a lot of driveways that come to that water runs down the driveway out in the road. There's a lot, it's so flat.
It
Because
is.
it's concrete.
Yep.
It's so flat that it doesn't, normally you have 2 or 3% runoff there. It just kind of bags. It doesn't take much on the shoulders to hold water on it, so the edges hold water. We're trying to do some shoulder projects.
Good.
and we've done some shoulder
Right, you have.
projects through there, what I call the low areas that really bag, trying to release. And I see the comments and the articles about, you know, this and that out there on that section. But ultimately, I want to repave that section to get the appropriate fall or elevation on that road so the water will run off. So that is my intentions of getting that concrete section paved over
Okay.
with asphalt.
And that would probably help going to that bridge as well, Stewart Taylor Bridge.
The bridge is another thing.
Yeah.
That's concrete under asphalt,
Yeah.
that when you get a change in temperature, it curls up.
Yep.
And creates these humps in the road. So you just like, they can show up any day. As concrete gets cold and hot, it expands and contracts. So it creates cracks and bumps and everything else. That's what's going on there. Our intention, we have quite a few on that section of 60, not include the two at the bridge.
Right.
But our Croker area is working with our Seafer area, which has we call it a infrared burner. And what we do, we go in and we heat the asphalt up enough that we can reshape it. And what we do is we shave those bumps off, get rid of that bumped up asphalt. We shave it off so it's smooth again, or fairly smooth again. There's one on the opposite side, on the other side of the bridge too, that we're gonna go over into, I guess that's Charles City there to get that, New Kent, New Kent there, to get that as well while we're in the area. But that is on our schedule to get complete.
Okay, appreciate it. That's all I had. Anything else, members? Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thanks
Y'all
for
have
all
a
your
wonderful
help.
day.
Thank
You
you.
too. All right, next is our employee engagement survey. Stephanie Burton. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman,
Good afternoon.
Board of Supervisors. My pleasure to have the opportunity to present to you the results of the 2020 Employee Engagement Survey. I know you know this, but building a culture of employee engagement is one of our strategic priorities. And the reason why it is so important is decades of research has revealed that strong connection between employee engagement and how well an organization performs are tied closely together. And that's because we know that an engaged employee find their work more meaningful and therefore deliver better results. This higher level engagement helps localities like ourselves achieve strategic goals, foster healthier relationships, encourage innovation, retain our employees, and deliver better services for our citizens. So at a glance here, what you can see is we conducted the survey August 24th through September 4th this year. Our return rate was 71%, so that's 14 points higher than when we did this in 2018. And just to kind of give you a little background and a refresher, in 2018 is when Human Resources developed the Employee Engagement Survey, and we did that to measure how well we are doing employee engagement. So we established it through 42 questions. This framework collects feedback from 3 different levels in the organization. First, from supervisors of supervisors, our frontline supervisors, and then our individual contributors. So we collect feedback from them on specific areas such as trust, respect, communication, leadership's behavior, motivation, and competencies related to our roles in the workplace. These results are brought to you today and organized across these 7 categories that you see here on the slide. Also, last time when I was here, you had asked me, when I presented the results for 2018, you asked me for some comparisons. So what I've done is I've peppered this presentation with feedback from the federal government's OPM 2019 survey. That is the closest one relative to our 2020. I could not find anything with other localities, so I did want to offer you some sort of benchmark so you can see how we're doing. I think you'll be very pleased. So let's look at the headlines. So the headlines here what you're going to see in the top row are the results, or what our employees are most positive about. And in the county, it's our mission and our goals, and specifically how our work contributions contribute to the quality of the programs and services that we offer here in the county. Also, the safe and work environment and leadership's support in a work-life balance for our workforce. The middle row are areas that show the greatest increase from 2018 to 2020, and the bottom row reflects those areas for opportunity. We took the 42 questions out of the survey to create your executive summary here, and what we did was we ranked those responses from the highest to lowest across the workforce, and that is the agreement levels there. So on the far left column reports those survey questions with the highest percentage level of agreement across the workforce. The column in the middle are those survey questions that rank the lowest of agreement across the workforce. And then that third column on the right shows you the highest increase from those 42 questions from 2018 to 2019. So let's look specifically at employee engagement and those 7 areas. Looking at employee engagement for organization, purpose, and direction, this category has the highest percentage levels, indicating our managers help employees to see not only the purpose of their work, but how each person's work relates to the county's mission, vision, and goals. I'd like to note that we're at 97% of James City County employees, compared to 85% of federal employees, know how their work relates to the agency's goals. Board leadership. A common thread across all the respondents was the recognition of how well our leadership's abilities during the pandemic, demonstrating flexibility, setting expectations for our employees, our residents, and our businesses, also getting the employees the material and equipment needed to protect their health and ensure their safety. Employees reported feeling that this demonstrated their value to the community and to the county. Information sharing and work environment reflects interpersonal relationships between our workers and their supervisors, including trust, respect, and support. Team leads and middle managers reported lower satisfaction with information sharing amongst themselves, while at the individual contributor level, they found ways of breaking down the barriers and sharing information and showing a higher level of satisfaction with job information sharing. The study also reported that our employees were very satisfied and excited to see the employee newsletter come back, and have identified that as a great opportunity to increase information sharing. Please note that physical safety remains high, and actually a couple points higher even after the Virginia Beach shooting and even during the pandemic. So it's a good report there. Looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, this year we felt it was important to include diversity and inclusion perspective in our report. You'll see positive increases in respect and inclusion and how the employees felt in the workforce. And since this survey was completed, the county established a diversity and inclusion resource group specifically tasked with helping to establish long-term goals, strategic initiatives to further demonstrate the county's commitment to cultivating an equitable and inclusive work environment that empowers all employees. Accountability and performance management drives employee engagement. It is important for leaders to set expectations and goals for their employees. Employees need constant feedback to know if what they're doing really matters. How employees are coached can influence how they perceive their future in the organization. And that's why Human Resources is revising the county's performance management process with more emphasis on critical role of performance feedback. We are implementing a supervisor's certification program that will provide them with the tools on how to communicate job expectations and coaching so that they can develop their employees' abilities to perform on the job. Job satisfaction, 87% of James City County's employees reported being overall satisfied with their job. That's 6 percentage points up since 2018. Many employees recognize the county's support through recent changes in the employee benefits to include leave donation program and child care assistance. And a significant number of employees reported being satisfied with recent changes in our health care plan. However, compensation continues to be an issue. There is a perception that the salaries are not competitive with other localities. Employees continue to seek and report a lack of career paths for promotion and seek more professional opportunities that will help them become more competitive for promotion. This is also reflected in the feedback that we got on our policies, that they were not clear and applied consistently. So this is another reason why we feel in HR it's really important to revamp our performance management program and implement the supervisor's certificate program. We believe it's important that our supervisors have the tools so that they can grow and groom their employees. So for next steps, we are continuing to use this feedback to identify opportunities to improve key business processes that impact our employee job satisfaction. Right now, our directors do have this information. They are meeting with their managers and team leads to get their feedback. Each of them got their own perspective of this survey and the results, and they're using that to help us identify county-wide initiatives. We will identify those and continue to track, monitor, and report those back to you throughout the year. So pending any questions?
Sure. Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you. I find these type of things so useful, and I think it's very important that if that we are addressing and looking at this kind of data. So I little disappointed that senior management that got interested in my job performance got a little bit of a dip, but there was quite a few that had a significant up.
Yes.
So that was good to see.
Yes.
And because I do think it is important to people, especially probably now when some of us are working from home, they want to know that their manager recognizes their contributions and they are connected in some way, even though they may not be physically in the same area. I don't know whether or not this is a place to put this or to ask this question or not, but just wondered, because you brought up the diversity piece, what type of, and you can certainly get back to me other than here, but I was curious as to what type of training we do on diversity or maybe unintended bias. If we have any training modulars through video or anything like that, or if we'd looked at anything like that for not just our employees with each other, but also when dealing with our citizens. So if someone could just let me know that at some point, I'd appreciate it. But I do appreciate this, and thank you for bringing it forward.
I'll just echo the very positive comments about the value of this kind of a study, and especially recognizing that, in fact, there was significant improvement across the board almost. So that's a great sign, but it also means that we need to look at those areas where there's still some concern and try to do what we can to address it. But we really appreciate the hard work that went into doing this.
Yes, thank you.
I want to say thank you on, you sit up here on the board, and of course, all of us are perfect and do a wonderful job, as everyone knows.
My question right now, and you might.
But, it's hard sometimes for us to know what staff's thinking. And the further in the ranks you go, the harder it is for us to understand, are we meeting their expectations? Are we doing what we need to do? Because we serve the citizens, we also serve our staff. And are we heading in the right direction? And what is staff looking to do? Because most of our staff are our citizens as well, so they're playing a dual role. This really helps to see that, our managers and team leaders and all that are in there and doing everything they can to bring staff along and say, hey, what else do you need? How can we help? What can we do to better your chances of moving up in the organization? And I think that's a key component to keeping people happy and employed with anywhere that they go, is knowing I've got a chance to move forward and someone's listening to what I'm saying and they do care about me. And I've only been here 2 weeks, and I'm getting information about stuff that I would have never dreamed that I would have gotten information. I like this study and like the fact that we're doing well. There's a few places we can improve, like always will be. There's always room for improvement in everyone. But I'm glad to see where from our first one to where we are now, we're moving forward and moving in a positive direction. And hats off to staff because they're leading that charge, and everything y'all are doing is helping promote that and helping giving us the tools and the staff tools to move things forward. So great job. Thank you.
I will tell you, in the responses, you wouldn't believe how many people just said, thank you for asking, thank you for giving me the opportunity. So it's very hard to ask for criticism and get it, so.
You're right. The only thing I will add is that 50% return rate from county admin, county attorney, and economic development. Tisk, tisk, tisk.
We will improve on that as well, Ms. Larson.
That sounds like a plan.
Thank you, guys.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our next is comprehensive financial review and forecast. Ms. Day, Sharon Day, thank you. Mr. Rogers, how you doing, sir?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Got it. You want me to hand these out?
You can, Mr. Stevens. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Before we launch into the county's comprehensive financial review and planning model, which is what's being distributed now, I'll provide a quick update on how we've been tracking so far this year. I did provide a financial update back in October that covered the first quarter of fiscal year 2021. And this afternoon, I'll update you on the results through the second quarter. It'll include the first and the second quarter. So we'll be talking about the first 6 months, which is July through December 2020. We'll start with the general fund's revenues, which of course is our operating revenues. And as we've done in our previous updates, we present this information on a cash basis and also on what we refer to as an accrual basis. The cash basis reflects the cash that's been received so far this year. And again, it's comparable to the information that you receive monthly from the treasurer. In comparing the actual cash collected this year compared to last year, overall, the revenues are down $2.1 million or 1.8%, which is right in the middle of that chart. And as you may recall, after restoring some funding to the school division, the budget reflects a 7.4% reduction. So we're definitely trending better than budget currently. Showing revenues in a different way, the figures on the accrual basis start with the cash figures, and then we subtract amounts that we collected this fall that were really for last May and June, because that was for the previous fiscal year. The reason that these figures are presented is because the accrual numbers are the actual numbers that get audited and ultimately that roll into the county's general fund balance, or what we refer to as our reserves. So as you can see, the difference in the accounting basis, the cash versus the accrual, does yield different results. While we're down 1.8% on a cash basis, we're doing slightly better on the accrual basis, only being down about 1.3%. It's important to keep in mind that should we continue with the COVID-19 pandemic and that being a factor for the foreseeable future, I would expect to take a harder hit this spring when the majority of our other local taxes is received. And in particular, that's the tourism-related taxes, which we'll discuss a little bit in more detail in a little bit. This, of course, is why these updates are so important, so that we can be proactive as that actual experience is being received. The biggest contributors to the revenue decline, of course, again, is the other local taxes, the tourism-related taxes, as well as charges for services. Charges for services is primarily down in the various Parks and Rec programs, specifically recreation center memberships, facility rentals, after-school fees, and day camp fees. Much of this is COVID-related. It's a result of social distancing, limiting the social gatherings, and then with the schools being in a virtual learning environment, having fewer day camps and after-school programs. This revenue loss is largely offset by the expenditure savings in the Parks and Rec programs. So this slide presents the same information, it's just in a graph format. And again, you can see the other local taxes, the charges for services are where we're taking the biggest hits. And we'll talk about the other local taxes next. Taking a deeper dive into those tourism-related revenues and remembering the state remits the sales tax and the historic triangle 1% sales tax to localities 2 months in arrears. Therefore, although we're 6 months into this fiscal year, we really only have 4 months of collection that pertain to this year. That is important because December is a crucial month for us because of the holiday season, and we won't realize that sales tax until the end of February. As for the lodging and meals taxes, those taxes are actually collected locally, not to the state. So we're only 1 month in arrears there. Again, we're 6 months into the year. We have 5 months worth of collections that we're looking at tonight. Based on the actual cash figures, although all 4 categories are down, we are seeing some improvements. We're trending better than we were a quarter ago. When I last presented to you, we were down about 32%. Overall, now you can see we're down about 25%. We're also trending better than budget in 3 of the 4 areas. Local sales taxes is down 10%. The budget reflected a 38% decrease. Historic triangle, the additional 1% tax, is down 15%. Budget reflects 39% down. Lodging tax is down 48%. Budget reflected 49%. So we're pretty close there. Meals tax is where we're taking the biggest hit. Meals tax is down 42%. Again, an improvement over last quarter, but still significantly down. The budget only reflected a 10% decrease in that area. Overall, when we equate all those percentages to actual dollars, because of course all those collections are not the same in amount, we're actually trending better than budget by about $900,000. And that's just netting all those decreases and increases. Again, here, this is a graph just presenting that information, the trend information at a quick glance, so you can see overall in the categories how we're doing. Switching gears over to the spending side of the budget, noting that our actual numbers here reflect expenditures, but also any outstanding purchase orders or commitments we have at this point. And as a reminder, the majority of our budget, about 54%, goes to the school division. 27% is payroll related, and we have a pretty significant portion that goes for transfers to our capital and debt service funds. If all expenses came in evenly, we're 6 months into the year, so we would expect to have spent about 50% of our budget. Overall, again, you can see we're at 45.4, so we are trending below that 50% mark. I'll talk a little bit about the specific departments next. This line graph shows the departments, the blue line, where they actually are for the second quarter compared to the green line, which reflects 50%. As you can see, every area is down except for IT. And again, it's important to note, not all expenditures are paid evenly over time, so we would expect some variances. Specifically for IT, it's a timing difference. The majority of their budget is for software and equipment maintenance on the servers and the infrastructure. And most of those contracts require that we actually pay in full in July or the first month of the year. So they're always trending higher than they should be, and that's the reason. I also mentioned in the revenue discussion that Parks and Recs fees were down compared to last year. Again, you can see here on the expenditure side, it's also down as well, which is making up for that revenue shortfall. Overall, looking at revenues and expenditures, on the revenue side, we're trending a little better than we budgeted, and on the expenditure side, we're spending less than budgeted. So overall, that's a very good place to be. I did want to note, at least for the first 6 months, for most of what you're seeing, because of the uncertainty with COVID, we did continue to operate the first 6 months of this fiscal year with all the expenditure restrictions that were put into place last spring. We've just recently started to lift some of those restrictions very modestly, and we are definitely not back to normal operations. but we will continue to require some additional approvals over expenditure amounts greater than $25,000. That concludes my remarks on the second quarter update. Unless you have any questions, I can turn it over to Courtney Rogers.
It appears, just looking, back of the envelope math from this, that the accrued revenues, like you said, were down about 1.3%, but then the expenditures, it looks like we got about a $4 million less in expenditures so far than we have revenues, which is a good positive sign for the track being on track for where we want to go right now. Looking forward to, there have been obviously some areas where what happened was different from what we projected. But looking forward to the spring, when we're talking about tourism and everything, does it look to you like that's going to hold? Are you concerned about any of the revenues, or and obviously we have the ability to tweak the expenditures to keep it in balance, but what are your expectations on that for the spring?
Majority of our revenues are not tourism related, although they do comprise a significant portion of our budget. About 70% of our revenues are the real estate and personal property taxes. And so far, those areas are trending very well in relation to budget as well as relation to last year, including actual collections. So that's a very positive sign. The sales tax continues to do better than what we had budgeted. That is also a very positive sign. The sales tax for education is actually higher than last year. So that is also very good because that helps our schools. 100% of that revenue source goes to the school division. It's a little bit of an anomaly when we look at our sales tax and we see what's happening statewide, but that's what the numbers are reflecting. It really comes down to what happens with meals tax and lodging tax, and so much of that depends on what happens with our area amusement parks and just tourism in general. Obviously, Busch Gardens just recently made some very positive announcements about the reopening. I believe it's on weekends for the next couple months. We've just started that, so we'll have to see what impact that actually has on our local lodging and meals taxes, but we are seeing better trends. Again, because we're in arrears, the December collections are just now starting to come in. We'll have that information by early February or so, and I can share that with Mr. Stevens to share with the board. We'll have the sales tax numbers at the end of February, and that's usually our biggest month for the entire year. So we definitely want to see how that comes in.
And my last question had to do with the real and property taxes. It sounds like what I've been sort of hearing below the radar on this is that the convenience fee waiver has actually helped stimulate our collections better than we probably would have anticipated. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, and you'll hear a little bit about that from our treasurer a little later when she's presenting and requesting an extension of the convenience fees. It has definitely helped from a cash flow perspective.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Day.
Absolutely, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Courtney Rogers, who is with Davenport, to do the next two presentations for you.
Welcome, Mr. Rogers.
Good afternoon. I tell you, it's interesting. Since last March, I was sitting back there thinking, I think this is maybe my 5th in-person meeting for a board. We've done so many Zoom. I actually had one this morning. I did a fiscal health update for another locality, another AAA, on a Zoom meeting for a retreat. So it's actually great to be out. And the funny thing was, I got out of the car and I went, I don't have a mask. I forgot my mask because I'm not traveling that much, and I just forget. The vehicle that I'm in, I don't use as much on the weekend. So anyway, great to see everybody. Perfect timing to follow kind of what's been going on there, in the last 6 months. What we hope to do today is kind of give you a sense of looking back using the fiscal 20 data and even going backwards, just kind of give you a sense of what's been going on. I will, while I'm thinking about it, just because we have been working with a lot of different folks over the last 10 months during the COVID pandemic, is that we're seeing a lot of the same trends that you just saw, which is sales taxes are up where we thought they might be down, but a lot of it has to do with the internet sales tax. Couldn't have come at a better time, and I think that really kept a lot of our local governments in good shape. And then, Obviously, things like meals taxes are down, and I understand, I think from our discussions before, a lot of that has to do with Busch Gardens, for you all in particular. So I was just talking with Finance Director in Lynchburg. Their meals tax is not down as much as they thought it was going to be, so things are picking back up, but they're not dependent upon a Busch Gardens either. So there you go. So hopefully that's a little bit of help. Just kind of what I just heard is not much different than what we've heard for a lot of other local governments on the state. So worth. So we'll dive. Oh, wrong one. Can we get the other presentation? Sorry, we're going to do that one second. We're going to do the fiscal health update first, please. Comprehensive financial review. We'll see that one. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk a little bit about the credit demographic profile. We're going to cover financials, go through some historical financials, talk about debt management, let you know what's going on in the market right now in terms of just the municipal market in general. We're going to talk capital planning, and then we actually have a potential refunding to talk about that I think we can take advantage of low interest rates and save some money. So we'll cover that too. So the other things that we'll talk about, as I mentioned, the audited 20 numbers, kind of give you a sense of what that looks like compared to where you've been in some of the historic years. We're going to talk about financial policy guidelines, how you look now, where you stand, go through the debt profile, show some of the key debt ratios that are in those financial policies and what it looks like. Look at capital plans. Now, I'll preface that with knowing that you're about to go into budget and you're going to talk about capital again. We're going to use what you adopted last year, the fiscal 21, just to show you what things look like. But we're also going to give you a sense of capacity.
Excuse me, can you pull the mic up just a little bit?
Better?
Should
Better?
Should be.
There you go.
Thank you.
And then finally, as I said, we'll show you the refunding opportunity and give you a sense of how many dollars that might be out there in terms of being able to save on that by lowering the interest rates. So first thing, why is a credit rating important? Of course, the county enjoys the highest ratings you can get, AAA, across the board by all three. I believe by last count, it's somewhere between 45 and 50 nationally, if I remember right, in terms of counties throughout the United States that have that. So you're in elite company there, having all three. So that is important. It's important for situations like you'll see in a moment when I show you the interest rate chart. Last March, when the market went kind of crazy, the highest credit ratings are the ones that, if you had to access the market, will be able to get in and get better rates than if you were, let's say, an A-rated across the board. They're going to pay much higher when there's times of market disruption. Now we're back to a normal market where the credit spreads have tightened back up. And while there's not, with the low interest rates that we're enjoying now, there's not as much of a difference between a AAA and maybe a AA plus. It's still saving you money. And so that's, it's always important to try to keep that AAA because getting it back is more difficult. So once you lose it, you have to really work hard to get it back. I always like to mention that there's a few things that when you're looking at the credit rating, there's four major areas: the economy, financial performance, debt, and management. Those are the areas the rating agencies are looking at. You don't have a lot of control over the economy. I liken it to a very large ship. It's kind of hard to turn it. You can make some minor adjustments here and there, but the other things you have control over: finances, debt, and then the management. Management are things like budget and policies, and so we'll talk about those. But those are things you can control. And when you're looking at Moody's and S&P in particular, they put percentages on these areas, and you can see Moody's is 30 and S&P both 30% of the economy. That makes up their rating when they're looking at it. 30% is financial performance and flexibility. How have you trended, budget versus actual, things like that. On the debt side, it's actually, believe it or not, only 20% by Moody's and 10% by S&P. So back in the day, we used to try to keep our debt to a minimum because that would affect your rating. Not as much so in this day and age. It's more about economy, financial performance, and then finally management. And management are things that you definitely have direct control over in terms of how you budget, in terms of your financial policies. As I mentioned, we've had those ratings since 2010 for S&P and Fitch, and 2015 for Moody's. Just as a quick aside, I will mention that S&P April 1st put a negative outlook on all local governments, all public finance across all sectors, not just local government, but utilities and everything. And For folks who had a positive outlook, let's say you were lower rated and you had a double A with a positive outlook, they took those positive outlooks off because of the economy, and they're really not giving any upgrades. And I've seen that firsthand for a number of clients that we've worked with over the past 10 months. So it's interesting how they have a different view than Moody's, who is giving upgrades, but obviously they're very concerned as well about where things are headed. They are keeping a watch on it, but there's no, I would say we're not in any danger, and what I'm hearing are things are very positive here. Now, there are some places like New York City that might be in trouble. Obviously, some of the larger cities are having issues, but with home prices still rising, that obviously is Sharon just mentioned, is that's a big part of your revenue base. That's something that gives us comfort and gives the rating agencies comfort. The other side, of course, is sales tax, personal property taxes as well. Obviously, we have all heard about how the used car market has been very hot, so that should translate into good revenues as we do projections going forward. Of course, then you wonder when that's going to fall off. So that's the other part we have to keep in mind as we do projections. Just highlighting a couple of the things from the commentaries. You know, it's been a couple of years, believe it or not. It's been it was November of 2018 was the last time we actually engaged them for a rating. Now, Fitch does an annual rating now. That's their process, and so we did talk to them last fall, and they affirmed the AAA. But it has been a couple of years since we've talked to them. But like I said, everything I'm hearing shouldn't be any issues. Everything seems to be going strong. I think if we were talking to them for this refunding possibility coming up, they're going to be very. They're going to ask about. They've always asked about tourism as being an issue. Well, here we are in a situation that I think we're going to be able to show them. We've always tried to say we're strong regardless of tourism. Yes, that's an important part of who we are, but we think we can overcome a downturn, and I think we're going to be able to show that. But I'm hearing, while it is a negative there in terms of revenues, you're offsetting it in some other areas, including expenditure side. So, as we look at some of the comparisons, this is Moody's data that we contract with Moody's to get their data. So your data is going to be the 2020 information that we put in there ourselves, but everything else is coming out of Moody's database. We included York County. They're the only one on there that's not AAA rated by Moody's, but they do have a AAA by S&P, so we wanted to include them as your neighbor. So you are still the smallest AAA by Moody's standard, let's put it that way. But when you look at S&P, York is now the smallest in terms of the AAAs in the state when it comes to the counties. Some of the things that really where this county shines is the income levels, the demographics. Median family income, you can see you're very strong there. Per capita income, very strong again when you look at all the other AAAs out there. And then median home values. Those are very, very strong areas. That really helps offset, frankly, the smaller population size when you look at all the different things that go into the economy and demographics. So I mentioned looking at 2020 compared to the previous 4 years. This is a graphic that we typically show and talk with the rating agencies about, just exactly the way you see it here. The positives are when you look at your revenues over expenditures, the green line is very positive. If you look at the numbers, they're very much in line with previous years. Actually a little ahead this year. I suspect some of that has to do with your expenditures at the end of fiscal 20. You probably cut some of those back as we started into the pandemic. And then there's probably some CARES money I'm suspecting in there as well. That's typically what we've been seeing for others, is that you've got a little bit of a bump in 2020 for those two things. Then, of course, one thing that we like to talk about when we're talking to the rating agencies is your strength is those dollars then go into the transfers out. Well, those transfers out you have control over. So in a downturn, you could slow your spending on capital projects and things like that, and that helps give you flexibility at an immediate downturn. If things, I know some of our clients that we were talking to back in April and May when they were setting their budgets were very concerned. Nobody really knew how deep this was going to go when it came to sales tax, and it wasn't until really probably June or July that we really started getting that data, again because of the lag more than anything, that we realized that the internet was saving us. Who would have ever thought that internet sales tax was going to save a lot of local governments from really having to make some very hard decisions and start thinking about furloughs and maybe even further cuts when it came to some of the FTEs. But at the end of the day, when we look at the blue line at the bottom of the page, you can see you're kind of in that 3 million to 1 million range, but all of a sudden it jumps to 12. And again, that has to do with the cuts you made, slowing things down, but also some of those dollars that you got from the federal government. We always like to show this slide when we talk. Your tax rate is very competitive when you compare to others. Especially when you look at Northern Virginia AAAs, you can see they're all in the dollar range, give or take. You're very competitive with Albemarle counties. Basically, you guys are almost identical there. Some of the other non-AAAs around the area have, there's a couple that have some lower tax rates. But then again, I would argue that some of the services you provide are a lot higher quality than some of those as well. Not in a negative way, but that's just the way your constituents tend to want more and want to see high quality things. Assessed value of taxable property. One of the things that I'll note when I compare you to others is that you have a very steady increase in real property. If we were in Northern Virginia and I was showing you one of those entities up there, you're going to see right after the bottom out in 2008, 2009, and 10, things went right back up. But you took a small little hit there, and then you just basically have crept back up. Sometimes it's easier to manage a ship when things are kind of steady than when it's going up and down the waves. And so I would argue that that's a strength for you all, and it's nice to be able to kind of grow at a reasonable pace than bouncing up and down. When you look at assessed value, this is on a per capita basis. So this is where you take the total assessed value that's personal and real divided by your population. You can see you all stand out. You're above most of the AAAs in this graphic. Outside of the three largest ones up there in Northern Virginia and Albemarle, you guys are right there above the rest. Unassigned fund balance. Obviously, flexibility is key. Being able to withstand any downturns and having some dollars at your disposal if things slow down is important. The policy that we have now at a target of 12%, you can see you've been there now since 2017. Obviously, a large jump again because of what we just talked about a moment ago with the 2020 ending and some of the CARES money. You had a nice jump up there. So that's one of the things that I'm sure will be discussed as you go into budget is, have some extra dollars there. What are we going to do with it? I'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about where you stand versus others. The green line there on a percentage basis shows that, again, keep in mind that this is before their 2020 data because Moody's hasn't updated all of that yet. So you're well above everybody else. I suspect you're going to see some other folks jump up for the same reasons. They got CARES money. They shut things down toward the end of 2020, and so they're going to see bump ups in fund balance. The entity I was talking to this morning saw a big jump just like you did. But what I want to focus on is kind of where your policy's floor is and your target, and you can see that when you look at that target, you're right there with the others, with most of the others. Just so you know, Loudoun, for instance, I know, and Fairfax as well, they keep some of their what they call physical liquidity in a committed area or assigned area. So this is just unassigned. I know Loudoun for a fact keeps 10%. That's their policy is 10%. They keep that in a separate committed area. So that they don't have just that number. They actually have more than that when it comes to talking to the agencies. But what I want to point out is that even if you were back down at your 12% level, you're going to be in really good shape versus some of the others. Why is the fund balance important? Keeping in mind that you've got to have day-to-day cash to operate. Local governments in Virginia, you get your big revenue paychecks, if you would, twice a year. You get some other paychecks along the way, but the two big ones come twice a year. So you've got to be able to withstand the dips in those other months. So it's important that's why we have that 12%. The 12% is calculated as of June 30, but if you calculate a different part of the year, it might be a different percentage because your cash flow is going to ebb and flow. So that's the most important thing. But then you also need to withstand, of course, we've seen ice storms through here, things like that. FEMA doesn't walk in with a check. They reimburse you later. So you've got to have dollars for those emergencies, unforeseen shortfalls that may pop up, just like a pandemic. And then, things such as if you want to get started on a project, ahead of, say, if we had to go out to the bond market and borrow for it, you want to have that cash on hand to be able to kind of at least get started on it before maybe we're able to get to the market and borrow money. So I mentioned, I know that's something you're going to be talking about is probably what to do with that, some of that excess. The one caution I would make is that the agencies do want to know, when they see that and then they see it go right back down, they're going to ask us, what'd you do with that money? The last thing they really want to see is like, okay, we gave a bunch of raises. Because guess what? The next year you do a budget, you got to figure out where's that money coming from the next time. So they like to see you spend it on one-time projects. And so that's an easy explanation for us, is to be able to say, well, we did it for these one-time things. It's harder to say, well, we decided to increase some new projects or services. We decided to start doing some new things, because then in their minds, that's sort of an imbalanced budget, because next year you got to figure out where that revenue is going to come from to pay for those projects. Because at some point that fund balance is going to go back down to its level.
Can I ask a question? Because this is was very much of a topic last year during our budget, and could be again, because what the school board urged citizens to do were to come to us to tell us to use our fund balance to make up for the gap in the budget, because of when we first started the whole budgeting process. And so I imagine this could become another, it could happen again moving forward. I don't know that, but I'm
Sure.
So just once more for the people in back, it is best to use this on a one-time project versus, and which I must say, Ms. Day also, this was what she was advising us was, if we do it to keep a position or to ensure raises for the school system, how are we going to do that? How are we going to replicate that the next year?
Exactly.
So
And maybe I'll use an example for those at home. Let's say you decide to go out and buy a second home somewhere because you have some extra cash in the bank. You can make that first year payment on the mortgage. That's great. What are you going to do in the second year, in the third year, in the fourth year to make that mortgage payment? Do you have enough money to keep making that payment? And so that's the same example. If you would have made up that shortfall in the budget, assuming it's all operational in the school budget, then when you go do the next year's budget, you got to find that same dollar amount, which may even have grown if you're given, if assuming those are salaries and those are going to keep increasing. So it digs a hole, and the term the agencies use is an unbalanced budget at that point, because you're using one-time revenues for something that down the road is going to be needed again.
thank you.
I think to Ms. Larson's comment, I think that they were thinking, well, that's extra money. That's money to keep us going during the ups and downs,
Right.
which, I wouldn't expect them to understand that, because, it's a lot to understand. And they're hearing, hey, they've got X amount of money left over in their fund balance, let's use it. And what we're talking about today is not using all our fund balance, but the excess above what we're gonna retain to
That's right.
keep us going through the times that we have the ups and downs and the storms, and, because the storms may be, by the time you go through FEMA and all that, you're looking, 9 months? So, you
If
paid.
not longer.
Yeah, you paid for a storm, and you're lucky in 9 months from now, you get your money back in to the community where it belongs. If you get it all back into the community.
If you get it all back. I've got one community, it took them 4 years to get all the
4
FEMA money
years.
back.
See, that's, I
don't
think
remember
that
what it
was,
here, but it was a long time.
what the parents weren't aware of as they were being led to use your fund balance, and come to find out the school has done better than what we anticipated,
Yep.
which is a good thing. And
Absolutely.
I'm glad they have. We're all tickled that they have.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that initially we weren't all thinking about, like you weren't running school buses, so guess what? The fuel costs were way down. I've seen that as well, as where at some of the 2020 numbers, we didn't talk about specifically your schools and what happened, but I know some of my other clients, schools returned money because of some of the savings. Electricity wasn't used as much because the schools maybe weren't open as much, different things like that added up. So But no, but you're exactly right. And I'll use, somebody will say, well, what about downturns? Well, let's just take an example. You're down revenues right now. Let's say it ends up doubling and it's what, 2.5 million or so in the hole at the end of the year. It's okay to use fund balance to make that up. That's what it's there for. But you're going to have a plan as you start working through your budget to make that up next year. That's not really, that's a reaction more than setting a budget and starting out imbalanced.
Yeah, that's our safety net to
Right.
carry us through.
We see use of fund balance in budgets sometimes, but usually the use of is for one-time projects, for capital projects, things like that.
Thank you.
That's, of course, staying within the policy.
Right.
The projections. So as we talk about debt management, currently the county has 122 million, almost 123 million in debt outstanding. You'll see the little blue box there. It says payout ratio, and it's highlighting the 10th year of 82%. What that's saying is that over the next 10 years, you're going to, if you look at that principal column, you're paying 82% of that 123 million gets paid off. That's very rapid. That's a good thing. To get the highest score for S&P in particular, they have a score for this, is like 63%, give or take. So you're well above that. We like to see 65 to 70 for AAAs, to maintain a good balance of debt that you're paying it off pretty rapidly. And what that does is, of course, gives you room for other projects down the road. So when you see the graphic there, you can see right now we're about 18.2 million in your fiscal 21 budget of debt service. It's actually dropping in next year, so that gives you room to take on some new projects. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The term we like to use is affordability. How are you going to pay for it? You may have capacity when you look at ratios to borrow more, but how are you going to pay for it? That's the affordability side. So the two main policies that we look at from a debt side are debt to assessed value. This is outstanding debt, that 123 million, divided by the full value, assessed value, if you would, personal and real property. And so you were just below 1% right now. Our policy is to stay below 3%. We got plenty of space there, no problem. In terms of when you look at other AAAs, you can see that the range is anywhere from about 1% to 2%. And so all are well within sort of that 3% ceiling. Debt service to revenues, some folks use debt service to expenditures. It's basically, think of it as debt service as a percentage of your budget. That's the one where most folks are have a smaller gap. And you're the same way. You're right around 7%. Our top end target is, or not target, target's that bad word to use here because we're not really trying to increase our debt. But the top end is 12%, and so we've got a gap of about 5% there. So we have room to take on some additional debt, and in a moment I'll show you what kind of dollars that might mean. In terms of again, going back to that AAA comparison, you can see the purple bars are where your target ceilings are, and then you can see the green where you are now. You can see most folks are there kind of in that range, with 15% being the highest there with staff. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you've got capacity, you got affordability. Capacity is, I like to liken it to the credit card limit. The affordability is the monthly payment. You got to pay it back, is the way I like to think about it. So what we did is a calculation here of looking again at the 12% ceiling and where you are now, again using debt service to revenues because that's the one that's going to constrain us the quickest. We were very conservative with our interest rate assumption at 5%. We could tighten that up and the number's going to get bigger. Obviously, we went out and borrowed right now. We'd probably be under 2%, believe it or not. But right now, you've got, if we went out this year, 163 million of capacity just right out of the gate. So over the next 5 years, you've got over 200 million. So you've got plenty of room. I know you're not going to borrow 200 million. But just so you know, you've got the capacity, but again, it's how much can you afford with, we're going to use example of the drop down of debt service in a moment. So again, using that affordability analysis, what we're going to again do is look at the slope, the declining slope of the debt service, and how much we could actually borrow again at that 5% 20-year level. And so the number would be right out of the gate about 17, a little over 17 million in 22, another 12 in 23. When you add up the total of basically that 4 or 5 year period there, it's almost 37 million. That's without having to find additional revenues, assuming the interest rates don't go above 5%. Obviously, if we can borrow lower than that, we could pick up a little more. So you've got some ability to take on some additional debt just with the drop down in debt service that's out there. Talking about interest rates, last year was an interesting year. This chart on the right actually goes back to the last presidential election, so the last 4 years. We saw a big jump right after Trump was elected because he said, we're going to go out and do a bunch of infrastructure, and everybody said, okay, that's going to cause inflation. It didn't really happen, so things kind of leveled off and actually came back down a little bit. As the economy started getting a little bit better, we saw interest rates jumping back up. And then right around the turn of 2019 into it was early 2019, excuse me, we started seeing interest rates starting to decline, just a little bit here, a little bit there. And you can see a pretty steady drop of interest rates over the period of 2019. Then the pandemic, that's where things really got, what happened was everyone panicked, pulled money out of their bond funds. The bond fund manager said, I got to sell bonds in order to raise cash to pay off the people who want to get out. And when that happens, what happens is it throws off the pricing. It's kind of like everybody trying to sell their used cars all at once. You start having to lower your price in order to get it sold. Well, in the bond market, when you lower prices, yields go up. And so that's where we saw this spike. Then the Fed stepped in and said, we're going to help buy some of these bonds. We're going to help liquidity, and that's where rates came back down. And then things really settled down right after May. June, things really started declining to the point that we actually hit a bottom in the 1st of August. Interest rates hit a low point there. And then as things started getting a little bit better, we started seeing rates jump back up. We had a lot of people try to get into the market right before the presidential election because of the unknown of what interest rates might do. We saw refundings, we saw new money. That caused rates to go up a little bit. And then here recently, we've actually seen rates come back down. This graph kind of shows the last time we sold bonds, which was in 2018. Again, the last time we talked to the rating agencies, late November. You can see where rates were on a 20-year AAA, and now we're all the way down here. We actually had a water and sewer AA minus, AA3 credit sold earlier this week, $60 million over 30 years because there's utilities, 1.8%. In terms of interest rates are really good. So I suspect we'd probably be under 1.5% on a 20-year basis if we were out there selling today. Capital planning. Again, as I mentioned, this is your 21 budget. You can see majority of the projects that you adopted back then were on the school side over the next 5 years, roughly half of it. And the other half was split between general services and parks and rec. And then when you look at the sources of funds, roughly half of it was anticipated to be bond proceeds. So about 64 million of the 120, most of it being in the last 2 years. And my experience has been that the later part of a 5-year CIP usually gets pushed around, and I know that could happen here again. One of the things that we did is we said, well, we need something to start with. So we just went ahead and modeled that up to see what it looked like, especially as we're going to talk in just a moment about the planning model. But we know that's something that will be discussed in the coming months here with you all as you get into your budget this year. We used a 4% planning rate. Again, as I just mentioned, we know that's very conservative. When we look at the debt service, again, right now you're about a little over $18 million of 18.2 of existing. If we were to issue this first issue pretty quickly, which more than likely we probably would push the debt service into next year. So we'll just say 18 million is our top. You can see we actually don't go above 18.2 until we issue this larger bond issue in year 4. And that jumps up to about 19.6, goes up to 20 million two, and then down to 19.6 again. What it looks like on a graphic basis is you can see it kind of it jumps up and then it falls back down. 2 things I would speak to. One, you have in your debt service fund, you actually carry a balance that we can use to shave what we call peaks. So we can use some dollars to basically sort of manage those jumps. The other thing we have in our toolbox is we can delay some principal for a couple of years For instance, we could delay some principal in these years and drop them right here, so that it creates more of a smoother drop down, if you would. So we've got some ways to get around that, so I don't want that to scare anybody, but wanted just to show you that typically if we just did a simple level structure, it would increase it because of that larger project out there in year 4. When we look at our capacity again, the debt ratios, it's no problem with debt service to assessed value, or debt to assessed value, and debt service to revenues doesn't go, it really stays about where we are now. It doesn't, it may be just a hair above it right there, but again, that's using higher interest rates as well. Payout ratio, it drops down to about 68%, but again, right there in a comfort range. Our policy is to try to maintain above 60, so we're in great shape there. The refunding that I mentioned earlier is about $13 million of debt still outstanding with the 2012 bonds. Some of you may recall when the tax law changed and the corporate tax rate was dropped. In order to pay for that, what Congress did was they took away local government's ability to advance refund bonds with taxable debt, with tax-exempt debt. We can still pay them off with taxable debt, which is about anywhere from 3/4 to 1% higher than tax-exempt debt, but obviously that doesn't give us as good of a benefit. So we've been, Sharon's been seeing this. We've shown her some updates over the last fall, but we talked about just waiting because we felt like rates were not going to get out of control at this point. And so what happens is the call date for these bonds is not until June 15. If we call them within 90 days, we can use tax-exempt debt to refinance them. So as early as April 15th, we could start looking at closing and getting into the market here in the next couple of months and actually saving some money, not having to issue taxable debt, which is going to cost us more interest rates. So we ran this assuming that we would basically wait. And right now, again, we've got a little cushion in here. We always try to be a little conservative with our interest rates. I think we got about 50 basis points of cushion in here. But even then, we're above $1 million of savings over the remaining life of this loan, a little over $100,000. So if we went to market today, we expect that to be a little better than that. The other thing that we might want to talk about is you have some new money that was in your capital plan, about $2.5 million for this year. Do we just go ahead and put that in there as well as new money while we're talking to the agencies, while we're going to the market, and go ahead and borrow that money as well? So it's something that we'll talk about. This is a very aggressive schedule, and that would be to talk to the agencies next month. This is a leased bond, so we'd have to engage the Economic Development Authority and get in front of them, as well as come back to you, obviously, with documents to be approved and give us the okay to continue moving forward. I suspect probably once we sit down and talk with Scott and Sharon, we probably will push back on this, and I suspect maybe either in later March or maybe early April try to sell the bonds. But what I'm reading and hearing right now is that rates may trickle up a little bit over the next, say, 6 months. Part of it's going to be what happens in Congress and Washington. Folks who are Wall Street that are predicting interest rates are thinking that it's the second part of the year is when we might see the yield curve, the longer end of the yield curve. We're not expecting short-term rates to jump up first 5 years for some time, but the longer end of the yield curve may increase as Congress takes on either more stimulus money, which then worries folks about inflation down the road. I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions, and if you want to go ahead and flip it to the planning model presentation, I'll jump in that after any questions.
I have one if no one else. It's more of a comment. I know in 2013, 14, we were roughly, just with my math, about 227 in debt. And now our debt load is 123, which says a lot to the board and what we've done in a short amount of time, taking it from 227 down to 123. So that's a significant savings, almost $100 million there for the citizens that we can put back into something else, and and watching things. And I know that we are watching that closely. We're hoping to be below 123 by now, but we had to add on a few things that we've had to change in the financing. But, you know, in 2027, when that dip comes down, that's really going to save us a lot as well and give us the ability that projects that we may have coming up to put those back in place and get back to this level, you know, which won't put us to the 227, because it's 227, I think we're right at 9 or 10. We might have been bumping to 11 at that point, and now we're down, you know, 7, 8. So, you know, that's a lot of savings to the community, a lot of savings for the county. So
And it
good
frees
job.
up dollars to continue other maintenance. You've still
Yes.
got roofs you've got to replace and
Pay to
and
go.
other, yeah, pay-go stuff. And
Yep.
and that's what I'll say as we start talking about the planning model is, I know there'll be a lot of discussions going on, and we just talked about fund balance, and so there's a balance of using some of that fund balance for some of this capital, but also keeping some for some of that pay-go, you know, within the capital projects fund, that type of thing. So
Remember, those pay-goes save us too, because we're not carrying that interest rate and paying that year after year. We're paying that off and moving on to another project.
there's also the balance of making sure that there's well, generational equity, that the folks who are going to use, let's say, that school down the road are still paying for it down the road and not paying it all in cash up front. All the folks who are here now are not going to be using the school for 15 years or whatever. So
Right.
there's that balance too.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, let's move on next, please.
Okay, so so as we talked last fall about coming to you all, we one of the things that Sharon wanted us to do was to build a planning model, and so perfect time. Obviously, it's a little more difficult as you're looking at what happened at 21 and 22 in terms of looking for trends, because we've hit this unusual spot that hopefully we won't see again. But one of the things that I'll mention that you're not going to see in examples here is that the model actually has 2016, 17, 18, and 19 as well for our benefit to see trends. Because what we've done is we've built a model that basically includes all the departments and all the line items that you would typically see in your budget. So there's a couple thousand lines of data that you're not going to see all today because I can't get it all on the screen. But we're going to give you some snapshots so you can kind of give a sense of what we're doing. So this is a preliminary look that you're going to see today. We are going to be working very closely with Sharon and Scott over the coming months here as you work in your budget to tweak the assumptions, these initial assumptions. And so just to give you a sense, what we did just to start is a 2% increase each year starting in fiscal 22 for the majority of the salary and what I'll call salary related things like FICA and workers' comp and lines that like had temporary help. Anything that had to do with a salary, we increased it 2% in each year. So when I say annual expenditure, it's in each year. We could have done all the lines, but we chose just to start with the larger ones and start at 25,000 and larger, and we grew those at 2%. You have in your budget what I'll call credits, because you have a lot of joint projects with other folks, like the school system, for instance. So we increased those to figuring that if you increase the expenditure, then the credit probably should also be increased. I bumped motor fuels up a little bit more as we were thinking about it, just because with the new with Congress, with the new president thinking that they're going to go more green, that's put pressure. We've already seen it at the pumps. Prices are going up. And then obviously one of the big topics that we'll look for some direction on is the increase to the school division. For the moment, we just did 1.5%. That was based on what we saw in some of those pre-20 years. And then we did a 2% increase because most of those had to do with salaries with the other regional entities, health service entities, outside agencies, and then for most of the transfers to the other funds. So think of it as, in general, it's basically about a 2% increase. And then on the other side, we did, for real estate taxes on the revenue side, we did 2% in reval years, and we did 1% in the non-reval years. So basically, as we just saw the assessed values have been in sort of that range. In a 3% increase in personal property. You've seen much higher increases, frankly. Again, being in a wealthier community, you have folks who turn their cars over more so than I see in some other communities. But knowing that folks may slow that down, we decided to be conservative and we dropped it down. I think that level was more in like the 5 and 8% range in some years, so just to give you a sense. And then we did haircut also personal property for mobile home and machinery down as well to 0.5% a year. and then we did a 3% increase in public service. So that's kind of again, this is a basis, a starting point, if you will. We took the CIP as we just talked about, just as you saw in the last presentation, we put that in there. We do have an input for if a capital project is going to affect the operational budget. So let's say you put a new fire station in service and you're going to have to add some more FTEs. We've got a line where we can add, okay, that's going to add X dollars per year that's going to now need to be in the budget going forward. So we have that ability to do that. So as I just noting that what you're going to see in terms of the adopted 21, of course, you made some adjustments downward for your budget, but the 22 plan did not get adjusted. So now we know, here we are almost a year later, that we're probably going to need to adjust the plan, but for the moment we haven't adjusted it, just so you know. So the goal here is to kind of give you a preview, and then we're going to continue working again with staff over the coming months to get back with you and show you what some of the outputs of the model is as we adjust some of these inputs. A lot of information on one page. And again, if I included 16 through 19, you wouldn't be able to see anything here. But essentially, this is a lot like what we just saw in the previous presentation with the history, which is you've got your revenues up top, you got your expenditures, and then we've got what we are showing here, all the contributions to some of the outside agencies and transfers to the other funds. The one takeaway I would say here, at least as a starting point, is that it doesn't look too bad. I mean, you look out in 2027, and we're only talking about $1.2 million of a deficit, or $1.3 million in 2026. So honestly, before we started getting into it, I wasn't sure what we were going to see, but this isn't bad. And I will say, one of the important things for the rating agencies, they like to see this, and they like to see that it's been talked about in public planning, 5-year planning or longer, whatever. And so that is an important part, especially for S&P. But if we were to show them a negative, that's not a bad thing. They just want to recognize, and they do recognize, that the higher rated governments are looking beyond the next year's budget. And so this is a credit positive. This is to show you sort of the revenue output. Now, what you don't see, because again, it would be hard to get it all on this page, is off to the right in our model, we show the percentage growth, so we can see historically what has transpired, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. But then we have our inputs, 22 or 23 and beyond, for those percentage increases. And so when you look at it on a larger screen, you can see all those inputs. For the moment, as you can see, for instance, sales tax, we decided not to grow it, especially with the unknown right now. We just left it flat. Those are the type of things that we're going to get into the weeds with staff coming up. On the expenditure, this is the department level. And again, there's more departments down below that couldn't get all on one screen, but this is, again, the department level. So you'll have not only the dollars, but again, off to the right, you'll see the percentages, so we can immediately look and see what has historically been the increases, and then kind of going forward, what do we want to project. Then we dig down the next slide into the details. Again, this is just two departments, which are the top two departments in terms of this way your budget works. And again, off to the right, for every one of these lines, we have a percentage change, or we can go in and just say we need to add dollars and change it to bump it up to a certain dollar amount. And this goes all the way down to the contributions. Even, again, this is exactly the same thing as what you see in your budget in terms of the lines. Sorry, this one got kind of a little wacky when we brought it into PowerPoint here, but this is your debt service fund. As I mentioned earlier, you've got the input that comes in, and then you pay your debt service, and you actually have a little bit of a fund balance down there at the bottom. So that's what I mentioned earlier, that we have a little bit of room to sort of shave the peaks if we need to. Got some dollars there that we can shave. Now, again, I kept for the moment, for this initial look, the general fund schools and those are basically flat in terms of coming from the general fund at the moment. And those are the type of things that we'll need to get into and talk more in detail. to answer any questions.
Questions?
I guess I had just one, and that is, your assumption is about a 2% growth in costs over the course of time, of the period you're examining here. And it's sort of a question of whether that's realistic. In particular, as we go to an increase in the minimum wage, and as we start to think about aggressive attempts to address our relative ranking in teacher salaries, and what we just saw a few minutes ago in terms of our own staff's view about their compensation, would it make sense to sort of see a couple of, a range, perhaps?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the plan. This is, again, just wanting to give you, here's the preview. Now we're going to start, rolling our sleeves up. I think what we want to start with is the expenditure side, obviously, and say, okay, what is reasonable for those salary increases? What do we need to go? And of course, right now we just flatlined it, but there may be, an increase of a certain percent in 1 year, and then it comes back down to more of a, CPI type. That's the type discussions that's coming up next. And then we'll see, okay, if it's out of balance, what do the increases need to be on the revenue side? After we have some, what do we think mills tax is going to do going forward? What do we think sales tax is going to do going forward? After we have those things that are economy driven, then what do we, in terms of what you all can control, in terms like the tax rates, what do we do there? After we make some assumptions on, of course, what do we think the actual market is going to do? Yes, that is we just haven't gotten that far down the road yet.
And it'd be interesting to know with your comment there, if we do 15, how does that change our structure throughout the county? Because you may have somebody that's been here a year or two and at 15, and all of a sudden someone comes in at 15. I put a year and a half in here and I'm at 15. Shouldn't I be at 16 or 16, 17 or whatever? And then the next one up from that, well, shouldn't I be at 20, 25 and 30 and 35? And it just keeps on, going up the list. And I'd really like to know how that affects us as far as our budget coming up. If 15 does go into effect, which it looks like it's going to, if it does go into effect, what does that change our bottom line as far as, how much more revenue across the county, or not revenue, but how much more, debt service or will that be to the county?
I think the $15 an hour is a goal that's set over a couple of years to attain, and there's a sort of plateau where you stop and evaluate what the impact has been. But yeah, certainly you want to know. You want to know what the long-term impact is going to be on some of our lower-paid current employees. Sure.
Yep. Mm-hmm. How it affects the whole spectrum.
Absolutely.
I did want to comment on the personal property tax. I'm doing my part. I just retired my 20-year-old Ford that I paid $36 a year for, and I will be paying an awful lot more to the county next year. But everybody step up and do their part.
Yeah, and frankly, I do think that there is likelihood of fairly rapid acceleration in personal property tax, with the domestic automakers and others now moving much more aggressively toward electric vehicles. A lot of people are going to be thinking about trading in for electrics, which presumably will have higher costs, values. And I was curious about I understand why you do it, but the sales tax revenue I would anticipate is going to be robust in this.
I was going to just, if I can add to what Courtney was discussing, the exercise, if this was just a math equation, it'd be very easy, right? If we were just looking at the past and applying the percentages. The hard part is the qualitative figures. We literally go department by department, line by line, because the personnel, what happens in personnel and fire isn't indicative of maybe what happens in finance staff. We don't have overtime, for example. And so that's where the work is going to be the next couple of months. We also know the last 15 months or so really isn't indicative of the future, or at least we hope. So we have to take that into account as we're going through the different line items. But you kind of touched on why we do this exercise, talking about the minimum wage impact. We want to be able to see that, and we want to see that coming. So we're not reacting to it, we're being proactive. Not only does it affect the county, it affects the school division and the other entities and our regional partners as well. And so that will also impact fringe benefits and that type of thing. So that's really the whole point of this. But we know we need to have a good starting point. 21 wasn't a good starting point. It was an atypical year. 22 isn't a good starting point because we assumed that, this time last year we'd be back to normal operations, which isn't where we are. So that's really where the work comes into play and really going line by line and applying that judgment based on experience and just things that we know are in the pipeline. And it's an exercise with all of our departments. We obviously don't know it all in finance. And so we work very closely with our departments about what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, getting that feedback, and then building that into the model as well. Sales tax, yes, we have benefited from the online sales, but that's going to level off. So if we had a 5% increase this year in a normal year, I wouldn't project that out for the next 5 years because at some point that will level off. It'll become part of the norm. So those are the types of things, again, that we have to build into the model. And then we have to make notes on our assumptions so that someone, if they open the document, it's not just a bunch of numbers. They understand the fluctuations and the increases and decreases.
I think that's a great point, and really is, this is an exceptionally valuable exercise that you're proposing to do here, because it will make us think as well about if we're contemplating changing to a different kind of model of service delivery or expanding a certain kind of service or contracting a service, what the impact of that is going to be over the long term in this regard. So great.
One thing I'll note too, that we've seen for a locality like this where you have a number of people who typically, non-pandemic, would go out to work at other places and then come home at night, we saw sales tax increase because they weren't going to work and they weren't stopping at the store on the way home in another locality. They're now shopping at home. So it's hard to know exactly how much of that is internet and how much of that is pandemic, didn't go to work related. But I can tell you that we saw some places that were just outside of major city centers did very, very well, whereas the major city center locations did not. Stopped on the way home, pick up some groceries or whatever because they were working late and didn't want to do it when they got home. Projecting.
Any other questions? All right, thank you all very much.
We take a 5-minute recess before we move. Sorry. Thanks.
All in favor of 5-minute recess? Sure. All right, we'll go recess for 5 minutes. on out of a little recess there, and next we'll do our annual report. Ladar, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon, Chairman and members of the Board of Supervisors. Thank you for allowing me to present an overview of James City County's fiscal year 2020 annual report. As you are well aware, FY 2020 was the beginning of some unprecedented challenges, and the global COVID-19 pandemic eclipsed nearly everything in the last quarter of the fiscal year. So for this year's annual report, we highlighted some department accomplishments, as well as each department's response to the COVID-19 crisis. Now, you may note that the distinction between those two sets of accomplishments is a bit blurred. That's because in many cases, some of our greatest accomplishments were directly related to some of the operational changes that were quickly put in place in order to continue providing services to citizens in the safest way possible. For this presentation, I will just outline a couple of highlights for each department. The full annual report is available on our website, jamescitycountyva.gov. Capital improvements projects highlights included the exterior restoration of the Ambler's House, roadway improvements, renovations at the James City County Recreation Center, and more. A few highlights from community development. We kicked off the Engage 2045 Comprehensive Plan update process. Community development was awarded $1 million in Community Development Block Grant to benefit 29 residents in 16 low and moderate income households. And in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, building safety and permits transitioned to 100% online services. In county administration, the new GovQA platform helped to digitize and streamline the processing of Freedom of Information Act requests. And in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we activated the county's Emergency Public Information Officers team and coordinated daily COVID-19 updates to the public. Economic Development announced the largest amount of investment in nearly 2 decades and collaborated with the Board of Supervisors and regional partners to help support local businesses through the Virginia 30-Day Fund, which received nearly 100 applications and distributed $165,000 within the first 60 days of its launch. In Financial and Management Services, the Budget Division helped develop 9 potential budget scenarios for the board's consideration, and the Budget, Accounting, and Purchasing Divisions took part in a joint effort to successfully administer nearly $14 million in CARES Act funding, which was the largest federal reward the county has ever received. In fiscal year 2020, the Fire Department worked closely with social services to enhance the Connect program, which allows fire and police to refer county residents 60 and over or persons with disabilities to social services as needed. Fire and Emergency Management coordinated with 5 surrounding localities to stand up the Peninsula COVID Operations Center to coordinate a regional response to the pandemic. Our General Services Department has worked very hard to keep staff and citizens safe as possible. Our custodial services began twice daily cleaning of frequently touched areas in county facilities, responded to potential COVID-19 exposures, and developed workstation disinfection guidelines. The Facilities Division built and installed physical barriers at all public transaction counters, delivered hand sanitizer, disinfectant, and masks to employees, and installed enhanced filtration devices to HVAC systems. Our Human Resources Department created a completely virtual open enrollment for FY 2020, and in response to the pandemic, they launched 3 new benefit programs, including Emergency Paid Sick Leave, the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act, and the COVID Sick Leave Donation Bank. In Information Resources Management, infrastructure staff quickly established work-from-home capability for over 200 employees within 10 days of the COVID-19 shutdown, and helped us all get familiar with those remote meetings that we are very used to these days. IRM also helped to develop a COVID-19 employee health tracking system using a daily electronic survey that's answered by employees at the beginning of each workday. In JCSA, the James City Service Authority, they completed the installation of new radio read monitor meters for customers and began monthly billing. And in response to the onset of COVID-19, JCSA suspended disconnections due to non-payment. The Parks and Recreation Department constructed new pickleball courts at Veterans Park, developed 25 new virtual programs and events to replace canceled in-person activities, and county parks saw significant increases in attendance this spring and summer as a result of the pandemic. Here are a few highlights from the police department. In the Virginia State Police Annual Crime Report, James City County was ranked as having the lowest crime rate of any other locality on the peninsula. Colonial Community Corrections conducted a reentry fair at the jail that was attended by nearly 100 inmates who were able to get information about housing, social services, and employment from the 13 vendors that participated. In social services, the Children's Services Act, which provides high-quality, child-centered, family-focused, cost-effective, community-based services to at-risk youth and their families, served 63 youth. In response to COVID-19, requests for assistance through benefits programs like SNAP, Medicaid, TANF, and child subsidy increased by an average of 5.25% between March and June. Last but not least, the Williamsburg Regional Library made a quick shift to expanding its collection of digital resources, and in response to COVID-19, WRL worked with local partners to develop a mobile and long-term Wi-Fi hotspot program funded by the Friends of WRL to make the internet more accessible to all. So thus concludes our FY 2020 annual report. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic is still with us and still affects the way that we have operated so far this fiscal year, but we are hopeful that we will see some recovery beginning to take shape in the next few months. So I appreciate your time, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions?
No, just good job. So appreciate all the efforts that are going on, and just as an FYI, kind of a good place to follow up. Latara has been helping me because on Friday, I'm going to be making a presentation with Mary Biggs from Montgomery County to the Chairpersons Institute at VACO, and it is about a citizens engagement. So thank you so much for all your work there.
How are we going to disseminate this information to the community?
Currently available on the website. The easiest way to find it is to go to jamescitycountyva.gov and search in the search box for annual report. That's probably the fastest way to get there.
Is there any opportunity to use our email list of folks who've signed up to just notify them of the availability?
We can do that, certainly.
Got a good story to tell, we might as well tell it. Right?
Yeah, it's amazing that, you know, with COVID basically observing or taking over your whole world, and everything that I know we went through in the very beginning of this. What are we going to do here? What are we going to do here? What are we going to do personnel? Who's going to do this? How are we going to keep this up? And it's amazing how staff came together, and with the leadership of the county administrator and his team, and what we all were able to do. And then looking back at all the things that have been accomplished remotely almost, you know, it's hadn't been a whole lot of in the office except for a few here, and tomorrow there's a few over there and a few over here. And it's been a lot accomplished, plus business as usual going on. So it does say a lot for our staff and our leadership and what's been done. And it's good to send it out to the citizens and go, you know what, it wasn't a year where everybody just sat at home and relaxed. Not only did we get the work done, but we got even more done than we had anticipated we were going to be able to accomplish with remote everything and remote meetings, and how fantastic they are, as we all know, as you get bumped off and you can't hear half the stuff. So keep up the good work. Thank you. Anything else? All right. All right, any board discussions? Hearing none, I'll move into the consent items. And the consent items, rather than read them all y'all know each one that's there. Consent items consist of 1 through 7. And I'm going to look to the board, anyone who wants to pull an item, or can I have a motion?
Well, the treasurer's here, so I thought maybe we could hear about number 7.
Okay, we'll pull number 7.
I'll move the adoption of the remaining items on the consent calendar.
Right, we have a motion. Have rolls, please, sir.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Ms. Toms, how you doing today? Good, welcome. Thank you.
Actually, I'm sorry, even though we didn't pull them, could we just get a little briefing on the COVID homeless information from, okay, that'd be great. But go ahead, I'm sorry, I saw Ms. Van Root.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Before you is a resolution just to continue waiving the convenience fees for our credit card payments. Just a couple of things to highlight. The estimate that we're using is between $350,000 and $400,000. And we base that on the fees that we paid for June and December already. The vendor has also agreed to lower our price per transaction based on the increase in the number of transactions and the amount that we're collecting. And Ms. Day has already informed me that we can continue to use the CARES Act funding to cover this.
Thank you, I just wanted to get an update from you, so.
And I just wanted to reiterate, my understanding is that this has really actually helped boost our collection of revenue. So it's a opposite direction of what we might have anticipated given the circumstances. So it's
Absolutely.
really, really good news, and thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, I'll move it.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion to move number 7. Roll.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel. Motion carries.
Ms. Van Root, how you doing today? Good, thank you.
I just wondered if you could give just a quick update about the situation, since we got the grant and what's, yes.
Okay, are you talking about the one from the Williamsburg Health Foundation? Okay, yes. So yeah, we were very fortunate to get, be part of the recipients for the grant. So the Health Foundation, as you know, has contributed $1 million to our area. So we are getting $430,000 of that. And so we are very, very pleased to be able to add that to the services that we have been providing to folks who are at risk of facing eviction because of being behind in their rent. So we have fairly similar program that we've been operating from funding that we've gotten from the Department of Housing and Community Development, where we've helped about 26 households so far with that. So if all goes well with this program, we can hope to serve between 50 and 60 households and provide them, 3 months of rent. The plan is to catch people up so that then they can take over, as people are hopefully going back to work and getting themselves in more stable ground, they don't have to worry about the rent. And so these are only for folks who are renting. We have, we're going to do all the push out to make sure people know about the program and do the intake. We do want to make sure that when we catch people up, so to speak, that they're not going to be turned around and be evicted. So we do have a guarantee from the landlord that this will then get them in a stable spot. So that's the one thing we do have to make sure. So we've had a lot of folks apply, and then some of them not necessarily end up qualifying because we have to do some negotiations and again make sure that this catches them up and then they stay stable. But we've gotten over $1 million in our housing department for various things related to COVID. So we've been able to help a lot of folks across the spectrum, renters, folks in our housing choice voucher. We've done some safety renovations to the housing office, PPE for people who do inspections. So we've been very fortunate in our community, and this just is, the icing on the cake, so to speak, to be able to continue to help us throughout this year.
Okay, thank you so much.
So, yep.
Appreciate it.
Keep up the good work. Thank you. All right. There's board considerations. There's nothing scheduled in there. Board's requests and directives.
Trying
What
to
was
think
y'all's?
what all I've done. Well, I've just virtually attended the EFD meeting, EDA, and the jail meeting. It was nice. Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for your help navigating through that. Appreciate it. And according to Ms. Larson, that was one of the briefest jail meetings that's happened in a while. So glad I jumped on that one real quick. So anyway, That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I had my initial HRPDC and HRTPO meetings, and there were quite a few good presentations, and I finally got them off the website and sent you guys the copy of them. But I'll give you just a quick summary. Basically, the PDC, their regional economic forecast was rather interesting. They showed that a lot of things fell and then actually recovered quite a bit during the year. But so far for the year, they said that the GDP within the area was down 3.5%. Employment was down about 6.5%, causing unemployment to go up. The actual port traffic actually increased 3 to 5%. So it was really interesting there. They had a TPO, state of transportation in Hampton Roads. Air passengers down 63% over the long haul. Rail 45%, public transportation down 44%. The port up 3%. So the port seems to be doing pretty well on all this. Road volume is actually down earlier, but it's recovered now. It's only about 10% below where we were before. The problems we have is that the speed of traffic is up and the fatalities are up. So they did say that our trail use, which we have a lot of in James City County, is up 100%. So that was the sort of the short cliff notes, if you will, of the state of transportation. And as I mentioned to Mr. Hipple, the first thing I got was the HRTPO's 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan. It was a technical report that they gave, but the thing is the last of 5 that goes into this plan. And essentially, it will come back to the TPO for final approval in June 2021. Bottom line is there's about $7 billion available for what they would call new projects that don't have commitments already, for local projects, for projects. Of that $7 billion, about $2.5 billion is available for local projects. So we have a couple that we had mentioned earlier that may fall in that category. We'll have to keep a close eye on that. One of the big things we did at the PDC meeting was to craft the letter and go through that letter that was sent out to the governor from the 17 jurisdictions about the lack of having a COVID vaccine. One of the things that was mentioned to me was that our area has a greater population than Virginia Beach and has a greater population than Norfolk. But Virginia Beach and Norfolk were getting between 5,000 and 7,000 doses a week, and we were getting 1,000. So it was clearly inequitable, and everybody was on board with it. It was a pretty good letter, I think. I think everybody got a copy of that. We sent it on. I hope we can get some changes made out on that. I did on the 13th, I did the WMBG interview. I think next up is, next day or two is Mr. McGlynn. So it's an opportunity to still talk to the folks. The Chamber Business Council meeting on the 14th, I had a Fort Colony Newcomers meeting, which we did with the James City County 101 presentation. Michael and I did that had quite a group, and they got a lot of questions for us. On the 20th, I did the same presentation for the Kiwanis Club. And that's pretty much it.
Sir, could you let us know if we get any kind of response to that letter?
Oh, absolutely. No, if we get any kind of response at all, I'll be glad to pass that along.
Thank you.
At this point, I think I would sort of hope we could hear a little bit more from our legislators.
Mr. Carroll said something regarding the beavers, which is a huge issue where I am. It impacts a neighborhood, and anything we can do. I'm sorry for the people. I know people love beavers. I understand, but it's causing flooding not only on the road but in the house. I think we're working on getting another pond leveler. One had stopped working. But if that's just something we can continue to keep an eye on. And it sounded like the National Park Service, though, was working maybe with VDOT, if we can just verify that, too. I did attend Dan Barner's memorial service on Saturday, and Supervisor Hipple had done a resolution, which was I read and presented to his family, and they were very appreciative. I mentioned that Mr. Hipple was a proud Lafayette Ram graduate, so they appreciated you doing that. Yesterday, Supervisor McGlinnan and I participated with the school board in an advocacy call to Delegate Mullen. The majority of that call was vaccine related in regards to teachers and school employees. And it was also, he emphasized that, you know, they were trying to do everything they could do to get kids in school by the fall. And WJCC did say they were trying to get kids in school as soon as they could get their teachers vaccinated. So they didn't talk about the fall. I did hear on national news that a rather large locality in Virginia, their teachers possibly don't want to go back until September. So I have shared with Mr. Stevens that if we're going to be vaccinating teachers prior to some other people in our community, which I do think is important to get kids back in the classroom, that we do need, that does need to be the end goal. So I had a tourism council meeting last week. Just as a reminder, any of our meeting materials are on Visit Williamsburg, so it's a public body. All of that information is available, or please feel free to reach out to me. But one thing that was brought up at that meeting was, you know, restaurants are hurting. We heard that earlier with our meals tax. Just a reminder that there is Restaurant Week. And if you go on WARAREST.com, you can, that's the Restaurant Association, you can get information about specials that local restaurants are doing. And take in or eat in, please help our local restaurants. They are really hurting since COVID, as our hotels, but something local that we can help out with.
When is Restaurant Week again?
I think it's going on now.
Right now?
Yeah.
Good to know.
So if you
Note
can
to
help
self.
out, that would be great. I will just, I have to finish. Well, no, first I want to thank staff very much for the work with VDOT. If we get
Absolutely.
anything done with the speed limit out there, I'm just going to be very pleased. But people, please understand, as Mr. Carroll's often said, everybody wants the speed limit changed until they go over that speed limit and get a ticket, and then they have a problem. So just remember, if the speed limit gets changed, you have to abide by it. But I remain most frustrated over the vaccine situation. I am very appreciative of all the work that is being done by staff to get answers. I think I could speak for my colleagues here, thanking you, but also say we are getting bombarded with people who do not understand what the process is. You probably, I'm thinking, are going to maybe update us.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what I don't understand is what was the percentage that was given out. I mean, I know, so understanding Fairfax County is obviously a much larger county than we are, but still, when the vaccines were distributed, to me, it should have been looked at by giving a percentage of your population. And I don't know if we can get the answer to that. I know I've asked you about that, but I would like to know if there's any way that we can find that out. I shared with you earlier, Virginia is now ranked 50th in vaccine distribution. And, you know, I don't think we want to be ranked 50th in that. And that is based on CDC and health department data. So it's straightforward. It's not, so it's just a lot of frustration around this issue. And I'm really hoping that we are on the path to getting it straightened out. And again, I thank you for all the work that you've done to it. I'm not sure that we're being heard. I mean, I'm sure these people are hearing me because they're sick of it, but are they hearing us in Richmond? I don't know.
Ms. Larson, I think I have asked Chief Ash to be prepared to give you an update. We have made progress. You know, I think I've shared we had 0 doses for public employees on the peninsula 2 weeks ago, we now have 7,000 that are being administered. And we started with public employees because we couldn't get permission for our EMT and EMS staff to be able to vaccinate the general public. We have now overcome that obstacle. So we're able to, as there's more vaccine availability, to offer that to the general public. And again, so we're making progress. It's just slow. And it's not the numbers that we need in terms of catching us up or doing what the public really is expecting. But it's showing up in local pharmacies. Our hospital systems are reaching out to their patients. So it is happening. It's just there's a high demand and a low supply, and the distribution system is struggling in between. We have fixed the distribution problem in James City County and Williamsburg, and really throughout the 3 peninsula localities with our clinics that our staffs have worked and worked and worked with the health department to get it so we could run vaccine through them. We're ready in terms of the distribution. So we definitely have solved that, and we definitely are making progress. And again, Chief Ash will have some more details for you in just a few minutes.
Oh, okay, good. And thank you to, I did see that I wasn't able to get out to the visitor center, but I do appreciate the manpower that is, and woman power that is going into that very much. And I do think, though, it does bring up a bigger picture about public health and how much, I hate to use the word control, but how much say, how much we have as a county over public health and how, what that looks like in the future. And so it's not a, I'm not looking for that to be discussed today, but possibly, there are counties that do it a little differently. It does have to be a funding source where you help, you may help contribute to the public health, but you have a little bit more say over how that's done for you and your citizens. So I do hope that's something that we do talk about in the future. So it doesn't seem, I wish the answer was going to be this vaccine, but as we are hearing, there's new strains coming out. I mean, it's probably something in the way of the future that we're going to be dealing with. And so every time we have, I hope we don't, but if we have another pandemic, do we have to always go through this rigmarole, or is there a way for us to get a little bit better, handle on public health? So.
And I think following this, our emergency managers are always good at those after-action reports, and I think statewide there will be a lot of conversation about how do you make it better next time? What do we learn from this time? What things do we need in place? So the answer is that will happen locally and statewide, and we will learn, so we'll be better prepared. The larger conversation of do you get into the counties having more control over health departments probably will be discussed as well. But to your point, it'll come at a cost, and you'll have to make that determination at some point. But we have some time to talk about that. I don't think there's any movement today to change that in the next month. But I think once we get this one stabilized and we're back to calmer times, there'll be some opportunity for discussion.
I do appreciate you having Chief Ash here today. Thank you.
So let me just comment on Ms. Larson's concern about health departments, because I think what we're really seeing is the price that we're paying for 25 years of neglect of public health and starving of the public health program by Virginia and other states all across the country that are experiencing similar kinds of situations if they have to rely on public health departments. They're finding that those agencies were largely carved out and turned into shells of what they had once been. I did get a chance to go to the vaccination center that's been set up at the Colonial Williamsburg Visitor Center, and it is an impressive operation that I know will be of great benefit to the community as we get more vaccines available. And now that we have the opportunity to vaccinate members of the general public, that will also be a great asset to us. I'm hoping that we'll be able to draw the health department into that facility, because I think the more that we can coordinate our activities with the vaccines, the better chance they have of getting in the arms of our citizens. In addition to that visit, which again I found great, I had the good fortune to be oriented to the center first by our new Assistant County Administrator, Mr. Reinheimer, and then given a tour by Chief Ash. So I got to see a lot, and the schools were well organized there, and all of the folks who were administering, whether they were school nurses or other officials from one local government or another, were just doing a tremendous job. I would also say that, like Ms. Larson, I did attend the session with Delegate Mulligan, and one of the other things we did discuss was state funding for education and a recognition that the state has to do something about our relative position on teacher salaries. That's the good news. The more concerning news for us directly is that that means that we will be expected to carry a large share of that commitment to increase teacher salaries, which I think we need to be prepared to do. But it is going to be something that, because of the nature of our state funding and the use of the local composite index, is going to have a great impact on our budget as well. But it was good to have an opportunity to meet with school board members and the members of the House of Delegates and Senate. We attended one. I understand there was an earlier session with Senator Mason, and I guess there are others coming up with our other two legislators, Senator Norman and Delegate Batten. In addition, I just wanted to mention that we had a meeting of the School Liaison Committee, I think, since the last time we met, and a good portion of that was focused on pre-K, and we talked a good deal about the agreements of what we need to try to do with pre-K, and agreed on a plan going forward, which I think the board will have an opportunity to discuss later this week. Also wanted to mention that I took the opportunity of a public hearing with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to comment on their draft environmental impact statement relating to the Skiffs Creek power transmission lines across the James River. They have developed a draft plan which was roundly criticized at this session. I will admit that I joined in that criticism, but encourage the Army Corps of Engineers to recognize that they really do need to take a look at the current situation as it stands, and there's no need to rush to conclusion of this particular study since the power lines are already in place and operating. There is more opportunity to examine what's happened since the decision of Dominion to go ahead without resolution of the litigation that had been undertaken. In addition, just wanted to mention that yesterday I also had an opportunity to chair a legislative briefing for the Virginia Transit Association, and we had a presentation from Jim Regenbaugh, who I think we all recognize as a great expert on the state's economy and the state's budget. And he, once again, like last time we heard him, I think, was quite optimistic about the fiscal state of Virginia as we're working our way through and out of, hopefully, this pandemic. And so there may be some good opportunities for us to hear positive things about that. So I think I'll leave it with that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. And I'll too bang on the COVID wagon as far as, you know, what's been done. Our staff has worked, this board has worked so hard and trying to get the COVID vaccine out to the people that need it. I'm just surprised that we've had this amount of time and we have this amount of professional people in place. And not only is James City County, but across the region willing to work with the health department and try to get this out. The delays that have been in the health department, not satisfied at all, and I'll say it. I'm glad they're getting a little bit better. I don't know if it was because in the middle of the whole thing, they changed directors and the director had to get up to speed and that slowed things down or what, but if that's just a, you know, when you look at a population, and Ms. Larson, you put it very well as far as percentages. I'd like to go a little deeper with percentages when they sent the COVID vaccine out, and they should have looked at age of the community. You know, because we've got an older population here, and they're going to be affected or possibly are affected. And I think it's a shame that how this was rolled out and put in our laps. We're the ones on the front lines to get all the, why isn't this being done? Why isn't that being done? Why aren't you doing this? I just want to let the citizens know this board is working very hard. We're working very close with the county administrator and staff to make sure that we have this out and out as quickly as possible. Our hands are tied by the health department and the regulations and everything else, and I'm not scared to say it because it's just irritating as heck. And I'm trying to keep my comments as clean as possible, but very frustrating that, we have a possibility of something that may help people and we're getting it out so slow. It's just poor performance on that side of the fence. But I want to say hats off to the county administrator. I know you spent a many hour on the phone, and so is your staff, trying to get this through, and in the meanwhile picking up the phone, why isn't this done? Why aren't you doing this? Why don't we have this? How come we don't? And explaining to us so we can explain to the citizens where the problem is in this pipeline. And we're set up and ready to go. We just need more vaccines to get out there to the public. At the rate we're going, we got 100,000. That's 10 months worth of work. The rate we're going right now, that'll cover half the state of Virginia in about a year. So you're looking at 2 years to get the vaccine out. Really? 2 years just to cover the state of Virginia. Does anybody hear that out there? I mean, 2 years. That's crazy. And I know that, I made some comments on Channel 13 when they interviewed me, and I said, if this is a hurricane, we'd all be gone. The emergency would be over. There ain't none left. And we're right in the middle of an emergency. And we've got trained emergency personnel that can take on this and help this move forward. And I know our trained emergency personnel have been working, trying to get release some of this, let us take care of this. We're willing to do anything. We're willing to do whatever needs to be done. So hats off to our personnel. Meetings, I had HR Tech Finance Committee looking over our 2025 goal to have everything in place for the ring and all the projects that we have going on right now in line and completed by the end of 2025. And that is a feat that I don't know has ever been accomplished in the state of Virginia. And definitely not in Hampton Roads. And hats off to all the mayors and chairs and members that are involved in that group in order to get that going and keep it going. So the HR Tech is going fine. We've got a lot of, and I'll try to get the exact number for the next meeting of how many miles that are in place right now and are being accomplished. You'd be totally surprised at what's being done there. Let's see. County administrator and I went to mayors and chairs. I got kind of locked out of it. I tried to get on the little thing that they have and loaded up the stuff and loaded everything, and they still had me on mute somewhere in the vast world of entertaining. Yeah, I know. I wonder why. I'm sending.
Is that by design?
I'm sending stuff to Scott. Tell him this. Tell him that. Give him this. Tell him I said so. And it was the same thing. And what I wanted is the mayors and chairs to send another letter. And they were like, well, we're sending one letter, which y'all's letter. We're sending one letter. We don't really need to send two. I think we need to send 25 of them. Obviously, they didn't get the first one. So let's send them another one. Maybe they'll get that one.
Got lost.
And at least the citizens know that we're willing to stick our necks out there, send a letter out saying, we need help. We need direction. We need this. We need that. And I don't think you can send enough letters because obviously, I don't know, maybe it got sent by mail and it got lost in the mail. I don't know, but I'd like to see a receipt on it that at least it was received in the office it was intended to go. So that's my soapbox, and I won't go any further.
The only thing that I will
Yes,
add
ma'am.
is that it's just, I think, and I take myself to task too. It's been a long winter. People have been social distancing, mask wearing, et cetera, since last March. And I think people are easing up a little bit because they thought they were going to get a vaccine. And I mean, just in the last couple of days, I know of 2 people who have been diagnosed, which I realize in the number scheme of things, but that's within a very tight circle. That, and so just to, just keep hanging on, please, and do what you're supposed to do. And, and then even after you get the vaccine, do that mask wearing until we can get to that point. I think it's 70% of the population needs to be vaccinated, and then that will definitely help. And we need it, for our economy as well, not just for, we need it for the health of our citizens, and we need it for the health of our economy here. But just ask, just keep trying to do, we're getting ready, Super Bowl's coming in a few weeks. I'm so sorry for my son because was pulling for Green Bay. But, just watch having parties, or, please wear your mask and try to, I know it's really cold outside, but if you can have a party outside with your mask on, but just be real cognizant, I think.
Going back to those numbers and that supply, that 70% is almost 2 years out. That's the reality.
Yeah. And
That should be the number that's pushed, that if we're going to do something, it's a drop in the bucket. That's 2 years. We've already been 1 year.
yeah,
So we're 3 years to maybe 70%.
can't do that.
No, we can't do that.
Yeah.
We can't. It's got to pick up. It's got to get better, and it's got to move now, not tomorrow. So that's just my little world there. Everybody done?
Mr. Stevens, maybe you could confirm, people that do contact us who have questions, are we still referring them to the health department? Because we're kind of at their health department's mercy with all of this. I think citizens think that we're the ones that are in charge of getting this vaccine and distributing it. We've been kind of at the mercy of the health department. So are we still referring people with specific questions to the health department?
Ms. Sadler,
answers?
if we know an answer, and we've been very involved in talking with health department staff on a daily basis, so if we know the answer, we share it. But the main question is, when can I get my vaccine? When's my turn? And we don't have the answer to that yet, other than sharing the general information that supply, at least to our peninsula, is improved over where it was. The hospital systems are reaching out to their patients. Pharmacies are now starting to offer it, at least on a limited basis. So there are more distribution points. We've got our clinic set up. But in terms of when can you get your shot, outside of having those contacts to your specific doctor's office or pharmacy, we don't have that answer. And so we are still sending them to the Department of Health. And I think Department of Health shared that they had over 13,000 people who had said that they're ready to have a shot. So they will at some point begin contacting and working through that lists. Well, I will tell you, for James City County, just looking at our census data, we're about 8,000 residents over 75. And I think about another 12,000 over 65. So we have 20,000 potentially that are in the group to be vaccinated today. But at the rate that it's coming, that is still going to be a while. So we're still telling people to be patient. We're still giving the Department of Health information in terms of specific questions about when their turn is. And there are an awful lot of questions out there that we just can't get the answer to, because it's not something we're running. It's something we've really stepped into trying to support and make it go faster and easier when the vaccine is more available, which I believe will happen, but it's still a struggle today.
I believe that when, at our last meeting, I brought up the point of independent healthcare facilities that aren't, doctors who aren't affiliated with Riverside and Centera, and I think Ms. Larson brought that point up recently as well, are struggling being able to administer. If you're part of Riverside or Centera, then they're a little bit further along. Do we have any answers for these independent physicians on why the lag is for them?
Yeah, I don't. I think that, I've been told that any doctor or medical group that can comply with all the CDC guidance can come a site that is shipped the vaccine directly. But the systems have to go through that. It's a fairly, I say lengthy, a 25-page document that you have to go through to apply to be a certified site, and then you can order it directly. You don't have to go through anyone else. And so we do have groups that are doing that. I do know that's expanding, and I think there'll be more of that. But it takes that effort on those sides to become that eligible site, and then you have to get in the queue where the health department or at the state level or local level is, again, you're making the request for vaccine, and then that request is being granted. So it is going to get better, but it's still taking time for each of us in these different entities to work through that process.
Thank you for everything you've been doing on behalf of all of us and the citizens of the county. We really
Yes, ma'am.
appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Stevens, my understanding was yesterday we put out a press release indicating that the city, the county, and Colonial Williamsburg were doing a joint hotline,
Correct.
and that at least to direct people to the right sources of information, that might be useful. I don't know if you happen to have that number available.
I do, and if Chief Ash doesn't, I'll share it at the end of his remarks, but I will tell you, we put it out there, not that it's new information, but we kept hearing people were calling and nobody would call them back. They were calling and nobody would call them back. So again, the city took the lead in working with us together to get to this point that we have at least a system where if you don't get to somebody, we'll call you back. And it may just be the basic information or things that are going on, but at least you will have somebody that will talk to you, and at least trying to overcome some of that. It may not be new information, but it'll be a person that's listening and you'll know you've been heard. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't mind moving on to let Chief Ash come forward. I will tell you, as we've talked, there's been a lot of effort around improving the vaccination distribution process in the peninsula, and in particular James City County. We've been talking to our counterparts in the other localities on a daily basis. So we are working hard, not just at my level, but the chief and beyond him, of trying to make sure we get this better. So Chief Ash, I did ask if he would provide a brief update. I'll turn it over to him, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at the end of his update. So, Chief.
Good afternoon. So I think we'll start with the last time I was here, we talked about many of the same questions that you've asked this evening, and hopefully having answers to some of those and kind of give you some direction on where I think we're headed. And so most important, you've seen the news releases, and thank you for coming over and taking the tour with us the other day. We do have the Colonial Williamsburg Visitor Center up and running. We did a pilot of that on Friday, and we're able to vaccinate over 400 folks from our Williamsburg-James City County school system. And this week, we're continuing to work on the frontline essential workers within James City County, City of Williamsburg, and York County, focused on the continuity of government. And that's really been a partnership with, the vaccine was provided through Centera Hospital. Great partnership there with Colonial Williamsburg and all the localities coming together. And that process has been very smooth. We've had just a few registration bumps along the road. At this point, it's all paper process, so that just takes some time. But we believe we'll be transitioning hopefully next week to an electronic registration system offered through the Department of Health. And that's really going to allow us to make that process much smoother, much faster. When we're opening those clinics up to the public, citizens in the 1B group, they'll be able to register online, and we can use that same system all the way through the check-in. So where we are today, we're getting the same calls that I'm sure you're receiving from both 1A healthcare doctor's offices, folks in the 1B group, asking, how do I get that appointment? As Mr. Stevens said, Health Department tells us they have a list of over 13,000 folks who have called and said, I want to be in the queue to get my vaccination. At this point, the availability is still limited. Virginia is getting a little over 100,000 doses per week. The allocation of that was initially based on, as we understand it, your ability to distribute the vaccine, placed you where you fell on the priority list. This week, we understand that has transitioned to being a percentage of population based. It's a more equitable way to do that. So here on the peninsula, as you know, the Peninsula and Hampton Health District are combined. So the Peninsula Health District receives about 4%. The Hampton Health District receives 2% of that total allocation in the state. And then our local health director will divide that from there. So we hope that our clinics being up and running, smooth operation, our facility with plenty of parking and handicapped accessible on the WADA bus line, a combination of multiple localities coming together puts us in a good position to receive a share of that. But that's still limited in what's available. That also has to be distributed between the health systems, the pharmacies that are providing that. So that distribution is still limited, and we've been told to expect that for probably the next 4 weeks, those same numbers, not likely to go up much from that. So that's really, I think when we were here a few weeks ago, the health department was telling us they needed additional staff, we needed additional vaccinators. Since then, across the peninsula, all the fire and EMS agencies have trained all of our folks through the training outlined by the Office of EMS and the Virginia Department of Health. We're ready to do that. Here in James City County, the school nurses have completed their training. They're part of the MRC volunteers through the health department, and they were helping vaccinate. So we've got the building, the facility, the parking area, the staff trained. registration system, and now we're just waiting on those allocations of vaccine to really be ready to go. Kind of an outlook on vaccine. Johnson & Johnson, as we understand, is possibly in the next couple of weeks going to have their emergency authorization. Like the other manufacturers, they have been ramping up production to be ready, and once they're approved, we'll be able to release those vaccines. And then AstraZeneca is still behind them. So I think for us, when we get those additional sources, we're really going to see an increase coming to our state after that. As we mentioned, the call, the information line opened up, and that number is 877-724-1954. Folks can call there. That's open Monday through Saturday, 8 to 5. And they can call there for more information. Again, we're not able to schedule them for appointments at this point, unfortunately. And the clinic operation now is limited to the frontline government workers that we've been working through. But we believe that we've made progress and shown that this facility is ready to go when we can do that broader group of folks. We did have some meetings yesterday and again today with the Virginia Department of Health. And tomorrow they'll be running another day at the Williamsburg Clinic, the Department of Health office over in Ironbound, but that'll be the last one they run there, and they will be moving their operation as part of the visitor center, which we're going to be able to put a lot higher volume of people through that center than we could at their local office. So all those things are heading in the right direction. I feel like we keep telling you the same thing. We're still just waiting on the vaccine allocation to go up. But I think we as James City County, City of Williamsburg, and York County have really done all that we can do to be ready for that. And now we're just waiting on, we have all the staff ready to go. We're just waiting on that vaccine allocation.
Can I ask two questions? One, the sign up on that you're talking about is the one that's on the Peninsula Health District website. You go on there and you determine which category you're in, and then you give them your name, your email, your text, all that, so that you are in their database, so that when they're ready to call you, they'll call you.
Sure. So today, that's the list they're keeping with over 13,000 people.
That's
on it.
13,000 people. Okay. My wife and I are on it. However, we were able to get our vaccine through our local pharmacy. How do I pull my name off of that so that I don't have an excess name? Is there any way to go through and bring it up to date to say I don't need it through you guys now since I've gotten it another place?
Yeah, so that's not super clear. We have had that question. The best advice I can say is you could call back and ask to have the name removed.
Okay.
One common question we've had is, initially when I called and placed my name on weeks ago, I was in a 1C category.
Yeah.
I'm now in a 1B category. Yeah. How do I get my, are they going to automatically bump me up?
Yeah.
I don't believe the process is set up through them to change people's designation based on scanning that list. So I think the best avenue is to call back and let them know to either remove your name or bump your name up.
Modify it. Okay.
So you brought up a good point. I failed to mention primary care physicians. So both Riverside and Centera hospital systems are pushing things out through there. If your primary care doctor is associated with one of those two hospital systems, through their electronic medical reports and MyChart, those types of things, they're pushing appointments out as they have vaccine available. So as we know, 65 and older is in the 1B category. They're really targeting the 75 and older so far. I know at the Riverside facility on Kingsway, they did a number of people over the weekend who were in that 75 and older that had their primary care with Riverside. So those avenues, for many of the folks who are calling, we're encouraging them. If your doctor is affiliated with one of those systems, that might be your best avenue, is to get it through your primary care. And then we can focus on filling those folks as we get the citizen groups.
My last question for you was we're continuing with the continuity of government with employees. Are the rest of the schools supposed to be this week as well? Because I know we did a bunch of them. I understand that it was primarily the elementary school teachers, since they will probably be the first to go back to the classroom, that were done last Friday. But will the rest of the schools be in this week period, or do we know if it's going to take longer than that to get through the rest of the schools?
It's going to take longer than that. So we didn't have enough vaccines to do all of the school employees. So we, based on the allocation, the number of doses we received, we divided that up amongst schools, James City County, City of Williamsburg, and York County, the essential frontline employees. So we do not have enough to do all of the schools. We know that the health department is very focused on getting schools done as well. And again, it's just based on the vaccine availability
when we
Is,
submit
is
them in.
is the, school administration basically giving you the priorities that they have within their people, so that they would say, here's who we want next of ours, so that it's not just sort of you say, all right, we'll bring them all at one time or whatever, but you're sequencing them as.
Yes, sir.
as
We reached
by
out to
priority.
them, gave them the number of doses that we had allocated for them, and they've assigned based on their priority. And I believe you're correct that they started with the elementary school because they'll be back in school first.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
So, wondered if we'd considered at all, it sounds very promising that we're going to be all together at the, but had we considered at all doing a drive-through? Because some people have mobility issues, and that just seems to really be working well in some areas.
So we've seen other areas in the state and certainly in other states doing drive-through facilities. That this topic has been discussed here on the peninsula. And the Peninsula Health District folks and as well as our hospital systems have been hesitant to do the drive-through based on the required monitoring period. They want to make sure that, so if you're either 15 or 30 minutes, you've had a previous reaction to a vaccination or a high risk, we ask you to wait for 30 minutes to be monitored. The debate is how do we adequately do that in a drive-through. Some places are doing something where if you start to feel bad, blow the horn. I think the question is that enough of a monitoring that we make sure folks are okay? You know, if you're doing 20 cars at a time, much easier than if we were to go to War Hill Sports Complex and have hundreds of cars that we were trying to monitor. So those discussions are happening. I believe at some point we'll probably transition to a system like that. We just got to make sure we have that monitoring capability captured in a good plan on how we'll do that and make sure that the health department and the hospital systems are comfortable with that.
I mean, they could follow up with places where they're doing it in North Carolina, about 2 hours from here. Couldn't they follow up and talk with them to see if they've had issues or how they've handled that?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you mentioned about the electronic piece registering. That concern, I mean, maybe my dad's the only person out there who doesn't have a smartphone or doesn't, I mean, anything. I've registered him using my email, and I've had somebody else ask the same question. If my email appears a couple of times, is that going to be okay because it's for him? And but so what do you do about people who don't use electronics? How do they?
Sure. So a couple options. One, the information line that we have stood up, the number I provided earlier, we'll be able to help folks through that. We also, if people are scheduled but maybe aren't electronic savvy when they get there, we have a number of tablets that we've identified where we could provide someone to help them get registered or get checked in when they get there. We believe that we're hoping family members will assist. We've also reached out to social services who are targeting some of the population in our community that maybe is struggling with technology or may not have internet access to make sure the electronic registration is really going to help us get the appointment scheduled and really streamline the check-in. So we want to make sure that we continue to go that route rather than paper, but find a good way to get them online, get them connected, and have someone guide them through that process. So we recognize that some people are going to be more comfortable. Even our JCC alert system, we have a number of citizens who call the emergency management office to get signed up for JCC alert because they're not either connected or tech savvy to get enrolled, and we're still going to have those opportunities available as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Chief.
Sir.
Appreciate it. Anything else on your report?
No, sir. Thank you.
No, thank you. All right. Have no closed session today, so next I'll ask for adjournment until 9 a.m. on January 30th, 2021 for the board retreat at the James City County Service Authority Operational Center.
So moved.
So moved. Roll call, sir, please.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan? Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Meeting adjourned.